before we get Kristen to go.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome to Transportation Standing Committee for February 9th, 2026. No treats, but very exciting reports will be under discussion this afternoon. So we have a full house here today. So I'd like to call the meeting to order with our land acknowledgement. The Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. We also recognize that African Nova Scotians are a distinct people whose histories, legacies, and contributions have enriched the part of Mi'kma'ki known as Nova Scotia for over 400 years. So welcome, everyone. We'll have the approval of the minutes of December 8th, 2025. Are there any errors or omissions? No. Call for a motion to approve the minutes. Thank you, Councillor Austin, and seconded by Deputy Mayor Cuttle. Question? All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion carries. For the approval of the order of business and approval of additions and deletions, Madam Clerk, any additions and deletions?
There are no additions or deletions from the clerk's office.
Could I have a motion to approve the order of business? Councillor Cuttle and Councillor Austin seconding. Can I have a show of hands? Approved. Is there any business arising out of the minutes? See none. Is there any conflict? Anyone has a conflict of interest to declare? I see none. Motions of reconsideration, there are none. Motions of rescission, there are none. Consideration of deferred business, none. Notices of tabled matters, none. Madam Clerk, is there any correspondence?
Correspondence has been received for item 1311 and 1312 and distributed to the Standing Committee.
Thank you. And are there any petitions for submission? I see none. That brings us to our first presentation. It's entitled Safer Steps, Stronger Communities, Reimagining Safer, Better Connected Communities from Armdale to the Pennants. And I invite Lori Batten and Helena Piccanini to speak to the committee. You have 10 minutes for your presentation, and welcome.
Thank you so much. Awesome. Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. My name is Lori Batten, and I live in Sambro. I'm here today as a mom, a long-distance runner, and a neighbor who spends a lot of time on foot across the Chebucto Peninsula, from Armdale through to East and West Pennant. But I'm also here today representing the organization that I've started, Safer Steps Chebucto, based on lengthy conversations with neighbors, community members, personal experience, and the very clear need for change. These communities are an incredibly beautiful part of the municipality, and really the country. It's a collection of coastal towns with real growth underway and tremendous potential. We're home to destinations like Crystal Crescent Beach and Duncan's Cove, along with ocean lookoffs, wharves, and some of the most loved nature trails and hikes in the region. Honestly, probably in the province, but I'm a little biased. So these places draw visitors year-round and shape daily life for residents who want to be outside, who want to be active, and want to feel connected to where they live. But as growth brings more traffic, our streets have not evolved at the same pace to safely support people on foot for cycling or even driving in many areas. And the result is that walking, even short distances, often does not feel safe or reasonable. What I'm describing is not just my own experience. We currently have an active community survey, and we're receiving significant feedback, along with detailed submissions through social media, our feedback web form, and email. The themes are consistent. Fear shapes how people move. It turns short walks into short drives and keeps people from feeling comfortable walking to school, to local businesses, to community events, or simply for fresh air. And that has real consequences for physical and mental health, for climate goals, and for the vitality of our communities. That is why Safer Steps Chebucto exists. Today, I'm here to share what residents are telling us and what the built environment looks like on the ground, so we can work collaboratively toward practical, phased improvements that make it safer to be on foot. Across corridors like Purcell's Cove, Herring Cove, Old Sambro, Ketch Harbor, and West Pennant roads, we're seeing the same core needs: safer speeds, separation where possible, safer crossings, and more predictable driver behavior. With that, I'll briefly share who we are and how this grassroots effort has come together. I'm gonna try to switch. There we go. So Safer Steps Chebucto is a grassroots community movement made up of neighbors from across the Chebucto Peninsula. That little guy there's my son, just outside of my house. We walk to school every day along a provincial highway, which is 70 kilometers an hour. And as somebody who walked myself to school as a kid, I was always 50 on a sidewalk, so it's a little bit baffling. Anyways, we come to this group from different walks of life and abilities, and many of us move through these streets in different ways, as walkers, runners, cyclists, parents, dog walkers, drivers, and more. And what unites our group is a shared belief that our roads are for everyone, and that keeping them safe is a shared responsibility. We work collaboratively with residents, local organizations, and elected officials to turn lived experience into practical, achievable solutions. We're currently working to formalize as a not-for-profit society so we can support this work through walk audits, streetscape assessments, and long-term community-driven projects. To ground this work, I'll walk through how we're engaging with residents and the common themes we're hearing from the many people who've shared specific areas of concern and completed our short survey. Excuse me. Our approach to engagement is very intentional and it's ongoing. We're listening across multiple channels. Through social media, our feedback web form, email, an active community survey that has been widely distributed across these communities. And the survey is already giving us a very clear signal about priorities. About 2/3 of respondents say the biggest barrier to being on foot is the lack of physical infrastructure like sidewalks or simply having nowhere safe to walk. Nearly as many point to vehicle speeds, cars moving too fast for the road conditions, as the next biggest barrier. And when it comes to solutions, almost 60% want physical separation between people walking and vehicles, the kinds of measures that create a real buffer and reduce risk. That alignment matters because it shows we're not hearing scattered opinions. We're hearing consistent, repeated priorities across different communities and road types. Alongside this survey work, we've also been meeting with elected officials, knocking on doors, and engaging local businesses and community organizations that share this vision. That outreach has already resulted in letters of support from community partners like St. James Church, Michoud, and Sambro Elementary, with more in progress. We also know that not everyone engages online, so we're hosting an in-person community meeting in early March to ensure people can share their experiences face-to-face. And all of this is to ensure that what we bring forward reflects broad community experience and consistent themes, not just a single voice. This slide brings together what we're hearing from residents and what the physical environment looks like on the ground. Across almost every submission and conversation, and reinforced again through our active survey, is that people have been very clear that speeds feel too high for the road conditions. These are narrow, winding roads with blind curves, and yet posted speeds and actual driving speeds remain high. People consistently tell us that being on foot feels exposed and unsafe. There are long stretches with almost no sidewalks or physical separation, and shoulders narrow and then disappear entirely. There are very few safe places to cross, even and especially near school zones. We're also hearing recurring concerns about driver behavior, distracted driving, impaired driving, tailgating and speeding, and a strong call for meaningful enforcement and traffic calming. Near misses are described as frequent, not rare. At key intersections, including where Old Sambro Road meets West Pennant Road and where Old Sambro Road meets Ketch Harbor Road, drivers pass through instead of coming to a full stop at the posted stop sign. That creates a constant sense of danger for anyone trying to cross. And I don't have to imagine what that feels like. That is my reality twice a day, every single day, walking my child to elementary school with a 1, 2, and 4-year-old in tow. The speed limit through that stretch is posted at 70 kilometers per hour, but vehicles often far exceed that. You're standing there waiting for a vehicle to stop and watching it roll right through or accelerate past it instead. It's not just uncomfortable, it's frightening, and it teaches children very early that walking in their own community is unsafe. Residents have described these locations as, quote, tragedies waiting to happen. And what's most frustrating is that relatively simple interim measures, like flashing crosswalks similar to those used near schools in other parts of HRM, could make an immediate, tangible difference in how safe it feels to be on foot and could help change driver behavior. We also hear ongoing concerns about passing lanes and blind curves, and about people having to walk along the roadway to reach everyday destinations, including bus stops. The result of all of this is that many people avoid walking altogether, even for short distances. These are not isolated complaints, they are consistent themes across the area. When the same concerns surface again and again, it's a signal that the issue isn't individual behavior, it's the system, and that's why we believe change is needed now before growth and traffic pressures increase the risk even further. One of the reasons I'm here is that what we're proposing aligns closely with HRM's existing priorities and tools. HRM's road safety strategy commits to Vision Zero, with a focus on safe speeds, safer intersections, and protecting vulnerable road users. The integrated mobility plan reinforces this through the goal of complete communities, places where people can safely move between homes, schools, services, recreation, and local destinations. The Rural Sidewalk Program provides a clear mechanism to invest in walking infrastructure in rural community centers. One priority we would like to see reflected in upcoming work planning is Sambro being advanced under the Rural Sidewalk Program, with clear next steps and timelines from staff. Safely connecting destinations like the elementary school, community spaces, the wharf, and local businesses would be transformative, not just for safety, but for daily life, health, and community connection. The upcoming Traffic Safety Act also has important implications once it's proclaimed. While many of the roads residents are concerned about are provincial, we're encouraged that the Act will strengthen HRM's ability to reduce speeds where it does have authority on municipal roads, and we're hopeful that helps move broader coordinated speed reductions forward. I cannot emphasize enough how frequently residents have urged that speeds be reduced. This concern comes up in almost every submission and is reinforced in our active survey. Lower speeds would be especially impactful in peak seasons when traffic volumes increase and visitors unfamiliar with these roads travel through coastal communities at high speed. Speed reductions and increased enforcement are tangible, effective safety measures that can immediately calm traffic and improve conditions for people on foot, while longer-term infrastructure planning continues. Our goals are practical, phased, and rooted in collaboration. In the near term, we're asking for speed reductions to 60 kilometers an hour or below, paired with increased enforcement and speed display signage. We understand many of the corridors of concern are provincial roads, and we're hoping HRM can help advocate and coordinate with the province to ensure speeds are reduced to a maximum of 60 kilometers per hour where possible, especially in areas where homes, bus stops, and pedestrians have high activity. We're also asking for a review of high-risk passing lanes in areas like Sambro Head, particularly where road geometry, visibility, and pedestrian activity doesn't support them. And we're asking for targeted intersection and crossing improvements, specifically at Old Sambro Road and West Pennant Road, at Old Sambro Road and Ketch Harbor Road. At both locations, as I've mentioned, drivers do not stop. Simple interim measures like flashing crosswalks could significantly improve safety for people crossing on foot. And similarly, one priority I'd love to see reflected in upcoming work in Sambro specifically is advancing it under the Rural Sidewalk Program with clear next steps and timelines. I also want to be clear that our immediate priorities are not rooted in extravagant budget items. I know residents don't want increased tax burdens. We're advocating for simple, resource-effective safety measures that reduce risk and help prevent serious incidents before they occur. We understand that no decisions or actions will come directly out of this meeting. Our role has been to listen, organize, and bring forward the many voices we're hearing from.
Excuse me, Lori, I'm sorry to interrupt. Your time is up. Maybe you could give us a closing statement.
Sure, definitely. So I'll just close by sharing why this truly matters. Kids learn very early what it means to move through their communities. They learn whether walking feels normal or risky, whether streets are places they belong, or whether being on foot is encouraged or avoided. Skip to the bottom. Across our communities, even very short distances are driven, not because people don't want to walk, but because it doesn't feel safe. When that becomes the norm, it affects physical and mental health, undermines climate goals, and reinforces car dependency in places that should feel walkable. We believe real change can happen, the tools exist, the alignment is there, and the momentum's building. The message from residents is consistent. Build safe spaces to walk, slow vehicles down, and start with practical fixes now, while moving Sambro forward under the Rural Sidewalk Program with clear next steps. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Are there any questions of clarification? Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Ms. Chair, and thank you, Lori, for the presentation. I think it's good that you're organizing as a community, especially if you're hoping to be part of the sidewalk program in rural areas, because that really does require community buy-in to make it happen, because it does come with a cost implication on people's tax bills to then pay for the sidewalks. And we've seen some communities say, yes, that's something we want, but then we've seen other instances like over in Porter's Lake where people very much did not want that. So I think it's important to do the work that you're doing right now if that has any chance of success out there. I wanted to ask, that one's very clearly HRM. I'm just wondering what the engagement your group is doing with your MLA, maybe with provincial staff, because that's of course where all those short-term pieces rest with, right, being provincial roadway.
It went green.
Green, yeah, green's good.
Thank you so much for the question. So we have been meeting regularly with our MLA, Brendan McGuire, and on Friday I did have a meeting with the provincial public works team, Elizabeth and Dominic, who's the area manager.
Okay, that's good. If I can plug one other thing for you on your provincial list, even if the speed limits gets reduced, we have the challenge of enforcing it, and we certainly don't have the officers to effectively be everywhere. The province does have the power to do, through their legislation, they could make electronic enforcement a possibility, which I think if you were to get like a 60 zone out there from them, would make that a far more effective thing than hoping that, the police are able to be there on odd occasion. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Deputy Mayor Cuddle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Lori, for coming in. You jammed a lot into that 10 minutes, and because I know that there's a lot on your mind, and you probably could have gone for another 10. I just want to commend you and the other members of Safer Steps Chebucto for the deep dig you're doing on this. And I think it's important because you're right, change does come from grassroots, and the municipality certainly does have a role to play. Enforcement is in our wheelhouse. That part of the loop is actually policed by Halifax Regional Police. It's the only rural area in the municipality that HRP covers. I did meet with the West Division Commander and our Community Response Officer a couple of weeks ago, specifically to talk about enforcement around the loop. And, they have a strategy. I think I shared the ticketing information with you, over 2,000 tickets issued in the last couple of years. So, it's important that we continue to do that. And I hope with the stand-up of our traffic enforcement unit again, that we'll see even more enforcement. But as Councillor Austin mentioned, it is a limited tool, and we need more tools in our bucket to be able to effectively address the speeding that we're seeing, not just around the loop, but all around the municipality. So, advocating for that photo radar continues to be a priority. Even if it is going to take us time to stand it up, we need to get that past the TSA, passed with that permission in it sooner rather than later, so we can get on with it. The rural sidewalk program, I reached out to staff ahead of your presentation today, and I have a contact. So after this meeting, I'll connect you with Emma, who's overseeing the rural sidewalk program, and we'll see about setting up that community meeting in March and having some staff there to talk about the program and what the next steps are. So happy to continue working with you on that as well.
Excuse me, Deputy Mayor, is there a question of clarification?
I'm clarifying what my response to the presentation is what I'm clarifying.
I see.
And the other part is the crosswalks, which you mentioned in your presentation. So we have submitted a request to the province to look at an assessment for crosswalks. I don't have an update on where that's at right now, but I'll certainly share that news with you when I get it. So anyway, thanks again, and look forward to continuing to work with you on this important matter.
Thank you very much for coming in, Laurie, and sharing your experiences. We appreciate you coming to City Hall. Next up is public participation. Speakers can participate for a maximum of 5 minutes. Please keep your comments respectful, on topic, and directed to the chair. To be able to participate using Zoom, pre-registration is required to register 4:30, the business day prior to the meeting. And today we don't have any pre-registered speakers. I will call 3 times to see if there are any speakers present today in the gallery who would like to speak. Is there anyone who would like to speak? Anyone who would like to speak? 3rd time, anyone who would like to speak? Okay, that brings us to information items. There are none, and to our staff report for the Transit Core Services Plan. And I'll ask staff to come forward. Should the motion go on? Okay.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Patricia Hughes. I'm the Director of Planning and Customer Engagement. I'm here today as part of the team to introduce the strategic roadmap and the core service plan. I'm here with my colleagues Paul Marr and Ruben Walker, who are going to lead you through the presentation. And we also have a number of staff that were involved in the development of the plan that are with us as well to assist with any questions. To start, I would actually just like to thank all of the people who were involved to support the development of this plan, including the staff, but also councillors who helped share the survey for us, and all of the residents that took time to fill it out and had their input help inform the plan. And with that, I'll hand it over to Paul.
During our presentation, we will be introducing the strategic roadmap. Oh, how's that? Thank you. Sorry, I'll start again. During our presentation, we'll be introducing the strategic roadmap outlining the guiding principles and the strategic frameworks that guide transit planning and operations. We'll provide a high-level overview of the growth in ridership demand, the evolving needs for transit in our region, shifts in travel patterns, and some of the challenges we face in delivering services that meet the needs of our passengers and the communities that we serve. I'll provide an overview of our public engagement and identify key themes, requests, and issues raised by our passengers and residents. I will then give an overview of the core service plan outlining main categories for investment that address growth in ridership demand, improve service reliability, and strategic investments that support growth and plan for future needs of passengers in the region. I'll then pass over to Ruben, who'll provide a detailed overview of a proposed new Route 95 that aims to serve the new developments in Bayes Lake, the growing areas of West Bedford, Carney Lake, and Clayton Park. He'll also provide details on the recommendation to modify Route 21 in 2 locations, and as well review the proposed schedule to implement all recommendations over the next 3 years, pending approval. Finally, Ruben will provide an overview of the evaluation conducted by staff as directed by Regional Council to expand services on Regional Express Route 330 to detour into the Fall River Commercial Centre, and why we recommend this be reviewed through the microtransit service plan, and instead invest in extending the service span of this key regional connection to 24-hour service. Halifax Transit has a well-established mission of working together to provide a safe, reliable and sustainable transit system for all. The Moving Forward Together plan, endorsed by Regional Council in 2016, outlined a comprehensive range of recommendations which resulted in the restructuring of Halifax Transit's network to improve consistency of service, extended service hours and enhancing reliability to make transit a more attractive mobility option. The MFTP resulted in changes across the entire network with more uniform service hours in a day and more service hours in the evening and weekends. To support an adaptive approach to service planning, the Moving Forward principles provide an evaluation framework in which to guide the allocation of resources, establish a transfer-based system built on the more frequent and more direct corridor routes, supported by local, rural, express and regional express routes. These principles, along with the need to invest in service quality and reliability, the importance of transit priority measures to reduce travel times and delays across the network, remain as relevant now as when they were first introduced. Since the MFTP, a number of plans and strategies have been adopted which provide guidance to the planning and delivery of transit in our region. They include the Integrated Mobility Plan, currently in the process of being updated, the Rapid Transit Strategy, which includes the proposed bus rapid transit network and an expansion to ferry services, the Provincial Regional Transportation Strategy by Link Nova Scotia, and the 2026 to 2030 Strategic Plan. Our analysis saw great alignment within the existing policy and strategic framework and the key role that transit plays in enabling residents to, and borrowing from the strategic plan, move better, enable prosperity in the region, and strengthen communities. The regional mobility goals that we are putting forward in the strategic roadmap are a means to identify the ways we've been working to advance these objectives and to continue to improve in areas of equity, providing greater mobility options, delivering safe and reliable public transport, and prioritize environmental, financial, and community sustainability. Excuse me. As outlined within the strategic roadmap and the staff report, Halifax Transit has shifted its approach from developing a single comprehensive plan that outlines the strategic direction for the next 5 years or so to a more adaptive and ongoing process. While the MFTP was a single comprehensive plan, the principles and ridership guidelines support this shift to adaptive service planning. It is also recognised that within the planning cycles of these larger plans, including the MFTP, additional network and service adjustments were often required in response to significant development and ridership changes. The strategic plan model includes a series of modules or service plans, operational reviews, implementation plans, and standards developments that will be delivered over the lifetime of this roadmap. The core service plan is a short-term service plan that outlines route changes and service level adjustments based on analysis of network, performance, and ridership, and also feedback from passengers and community. This, along with the microtransit service plan also being presented today, are the first two modules to be delivered in the strategic roadmap. The strategic roadmap document itself outlines the overarching policy and strategic framework, as well as the needs, issues, and opportunities which inform the preparation of both the modules today and also others for the next couple of years. There are a number of advantages with shorter service plans in that planning, engagement, and service adjustments can shift to an ongoing process. And those service requests that are not included as recommendations in the current plan can be revisited in a future core service plan. And in fact, as you will note, in the core service plan itself, a series of opportunities are outlined which we believe have merit, yet currently are not feasible or able to be resourced. As outlined in the strategic roadmap and staff report, a range of factors leading to growth in ridership demand across the network, including population growth and increased density throughout the region. Route changes and more consistent service levels has led to ridership increases, and those highest increases are occurring in locations where previously transit ridership was low, which includes business parks and developing communities. Factors including network and service changes implemented by the MFTP, growth in the region, and shifting work and commuting patterns have resulted in significant shifts in transit travel patterns, including Demand during non-peak periods is increasing, highest relative growth on weekends. Ridership remains high, though, on weekdays, with highest ridership on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and Wednesdays not far behind. Peak travel periods are expanding, with more passengers travelling earlier and later, and ferry ridership continues to increase. With this growth in ridership and passengers travelling in expanded ways across the network, a number of factors impact on service reliability and the resources available to adapt to address demand. Buses navigating busy roads and intersections is impacting transit travel times and on-time performance. This impact is felt both on conventional services as well as Accessa bus services, where despite recent increases in service hours, longer travel times have resulted in less trips that were fulfilled in 2025 compared with 2018. This slide provides an opportunity to identify the trade-off between investing to meet ridership demand on existing services and opportunities to make strategic investments which support growth in transit use. The maps on this slide identify the change in boardings on stops within communities from 2018 to 2025. Alongside this is the percentage of boardings that occur in each area to the total boardings across the networks, and all of this is for the months of September and October in 2018 and 2025. As it's complicated, I'm going to further explain by highlighting three areas with interesting trends. Routes serving Burnside have seen a 73.2% increase on boardings between the years of 2018 and 2025. And we also heard during our engagement from residents residing in communities across the region who use transit to commute to and from Burnside each day. Similarly, Bayers Lake has seen an increase of 64% roughly in boardings during the same period. Moving to West Bedford provides an example of the growth in ridership demand that can result from strategic investment. To serve this growing community, a park and ride was built on Innovation Drive alongside service changes that extended routes and added express services. These investments have returned a growth of 492% more boardings since 2018. However, compared to the overall boardings across the network, boardings in West Bedford remain low, constituting around 1% of total boardings. I'd also like to note that the completion of Wright Cove Terminal is expected that this investment may similarly support a continued growth in ridership in Burnside. Just highlighting a couple of other areas with significant increases in boardings. Bedford, around 59%. Mainland South, which includes Cowie Hill and Spryfield, around 39%. Mainland North, including Clayton Park, Rockingham and Bedford South, around 36%. Halifax North, around 23%. Dartmouth, outside the circumferential, 22%, and Sackville, 21%. Looking at Halifax, which has seen a small decrease in boardings by around 3.7% in the same period. However, it is still the main origin and destination point for many of our passengers. 37.4% of total boardings occur here. Other areas with a high percentage of total boardings include Dartmouth within the circumferential at 17%, and Mainland North, which is already mentioned, has experienced a high increase in boardings, is about 13% of total boardings. Comparing the daily average boardings of conventional bus services by hour between 2018 and 25 indicate a trend towards earlier commuting hours. While average weekday boardings are slightly higher in 2025, a 2.6% increase, earlier and later peak periods are seeing increases in a number of boardings, while traditionally busier periods are more stable or experiencing a slight decrease in boardings. While ridership has seen a modest gain, the highest increases are in non-peak periods. As noted, evenings have seen a significant increase in ridership demand. However, the highest relative ridership growth is on weekends across the service span, particularly on Sundays and holidays. We're also noticing that ridership on early morning trips on weekends has increased, indicating that passengers are using transit to commute to work. What we heard during engagement reinforces this data. We heard the passengers are commuting to work earlier and leaving earlier, while others are making their evening commute in the late afternoon or early evening. Two of our partner engagement events, one with the health sector workers and other with newcomers, highlighted what we heard across the board, and I will further explain. Health sector workers are requesting express services to run earlier so they can reduce the travel time needed to arrive at work on time or to avoid using their car for their commute. And also from newcomers, we heard that travel times are longer on weekends, especially on Sundays when the frequency of buses are typically lower, particularly on local routes. This slide provides an opportunity to highlight the impact of network and schedule changes implemented through the MFTP and the degree the network is utilised across all periods in the week. The maps on this slide are busy. They indicate all routes across the network. These are based on ridership guidelines, which identify routes that are performing well above guidelines, those which are meeting guidelines, and those which have lower ridership than expected. The ridership metrics shown on this map are slightly different in that they indicate route performance in terms of the numbers of passengers served for each hour of service during weekday peak, weekday non-peak, and weekend periods. The ranges shown on the map include 3 categories that are symbolized in different shades of green, where route performance when averaged out ranges between meeting guidelines or above guidelines. Those routes identified in white are generally, when averaged out, generally perform 2 times or more above the ridership guidelines for that period. During the weekday peak period, you may be able to recognize some routes we're proposing to increase services on, including Route 3, 8, 9A and B, and Route 28. You will note that the majority of routes of the network, falls within the green categories, meeting or exceeding guidelines, and lots of routes symbolized in white as having more than 46 passengers per hour. As noted in the report, while some of the ridership increases have been modest when compared to the overall numbering boardings, we have seen significant increase in work overloads, particularly on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. This provides challenges when identifying opportunities to reallocate resources from a low ridership route to address demand where it is needed, particularly as those low-performing routes, which are symbolized in red on the maps, include routes which meet ridership guidelines during some but not all periods, and those long-standing routes which provide a regional connection for the communities that they serve. Year-over-year trends for network-wide on-time performance prior to 2021 and 2022 ranged between 77 to 79%. This falls just below the overall target of the 85%. It also should be noted that our on-time performance standard is 3 minutes, which is lower than other agencies, which tends to be around 5. Since 2023, on-time performance has been declining despite additional running time being added to many routes. Busy roads and navigating complex intersections with a high volume of vehicles are the major contributors to service delays. Typically, on-time performance is lower during peak weekday periods. However, recently delays caused by traffic volumes are being observed across many weekday and weekend periods. The schedule adjustments implemented in recent years have only slowed this downward trend while also increasing passenger travel time. The extended travel times also further constrain available resources, reducing the ability to reallocate resources to address demand. I'll now give a brief overview of our engagement summary, and I will just also note that there's more substantive information within the strategic roadmap and the core service plan, and also we will be publishing a report on the survey results itself on our website. The engagement for the strategic roadmap and core service plan was comprehensive, and our strategy included draft elements for both plans along with proposals were shared on Engage Halifax. We provided multiple opportunities for passengers and residents to engage and provide feedback on these materials, or more generally on their experiences of taking transit. These include an online and paper survey, in-person engagement events where we gathered feedback, and these were held at terminals and on bus and ferry trips. And we also offered a range of targeted consultations, which included meetings with members of regional council, businesses, students, sector organizations, and special interest and advocacy groups. We applied an equity and accessibility lens throughout. This is evident in our approach to designing the survey, which was accessible and was available in different formats. But we also provided lots of choice to the degree passengers and residents wanted to engage. We also tracked responses and added additional engagement events to identify areas, groups, and communities where responses were lower. These additional events were our way of making sure that those who rely on transit were able to provide feedback and contribute their perspectives on where transit can evolve in the region. On the slide, there's a breakdown of responses. We've got around about 5,673 responses, but this is broken out across the different sections, given the fact that the survey provided lots of choice to respondents. So therefore, the response rates do differ across the survey. The table outlines the responses for each section, with feedback on existing services garnering the most responses. When providing feedback on existing services, requests for more frequent service was the most requested improvement we received. They were often tied to capacity issues during busy periods and the need to reduce wait times and also overall travel times. We also heard about the issues of making transfers due to delay to connecting routes. Extending the service ban in response to shifting travel patterns was also frequently requested, particularly on express routes. For our key focus areas, concepts and proposals were shared to improve transit service in Bayers Lake, West Bedford, and Port Wallace. The proposals had broad community support, with the feedback that we received informing our final recommendations outlined in the core service plan. We also asked about priority areas, and the chart on the slide highlights the breakdown of those priorities according to our respondents. And the highest was on service reliability, followed by improving regional connections through expanding the service area and implementing a rapid transit network, followed by requests to upgrade transit infrastructure. I'm now going to shift to provide an overview of our core service plan and the recommendations able to be implemented within the lifetime of the plan. We've broken these into three following investment categories. Investing to increase services where ridership demand is currently exceeding service levels, investing in a more reliable network, and finally, investing strategically to support growth. Thank you. We've got around improvements recommended for around 25 routes, which constitutes about 37% of routes across the network. These recommendations range from more targeted adjustments, for example, additional trips, say on the Route 56, where we're seeing some high traffic or capacity issues on Route 56 in the afternoons. We're also making some recommendations to increase frequency on a number of very busy routes, including Route 3, Route 8, and 9A and 9B. Those ones were outlined in our priority list that we shared for public engagement. However, we've got frequency increase recommendations for other routes, such as Route 5 on Sundays and during the afternoons on Route 28 and Route 91. And these were increased in our priority list based on feedback that we received during our recent engagement. We've also got investments to improve service reliability, and an example of that is like scheduling adjustments for Route 24, which we've heard a lot from operators, operation staff, and passengers on how extended travel times often result in delays for this route. We're proposing to adjust the schedule so that more accurately reflects the time the bus takes to travel along this route. A number of route modifications are included in our recommendations, including those changes on Route 21, which we'll go into more detail later, and also modifying Express Route 165 to serve Portland Estates. Excuse me. This suggestion we received was proposed by a member of Regional Council. And we have a number of more significant investments, which includes, as already mentioned, Route 95 Brookline, and to launch 24-hour transit service for the first time in Halifax on Route 320, Airport Fall River. I'm now going to hand over to Ruben, who will showcase those two routes I've already mentioned, Route 21 and Route 95. While we're only showing those two routes, all recommended route modifications are included within the core service plan and report, and we do have supplementary slides which we can pull up as required in response to questions if you have any.
Thank you, Paul. So in this service plan, we are introducing a new route. It's called Route 95 Brookline. This route was conceived because we identified both West Bedford and Bayers Lake as growing communities that need better transit. West Bedford has been rapidly growing with a 492% increase in transit boarding since 2018, and thousands of housing units being built with more on the way. Bayers Lake has also been expanding with more businesses and jobs choosing to locate there. This route aims to provide more travel options for West Bedford residents who are currently only served by routes oriented towards downtown Halifax. This route provides West Bedford residents direct connections to shopping, jobs, and activities in Bayers Lake, Clayton Park, and other regions of the North Mainland. There's also a connection at Lacewood Terminal, which provides brand new transfer options for West Bedford residents. This route also provides access to the southern section of Chain Lake Drive in Bayers Lake, which previously had transit service, no longer does, and has seen requests from residents to reinstate service there. This route also provides an additional connection to Ragged Lake Transit Center, which is currently only served by one route. To start out, we're proposing a 30-minute frequency for this route during the weekdays with 60-minute frequency on weekends. The frequency may be adjusted in the future depending on ridership demand. Another change we're proposing is a series of adjustments to Route 21. These adjustments will occur in 2 stages. When first designing our service changes, we proposed to take this route off of Horseshoe Lake Drive to serve Hobson's Lake Drive instead. The bus stops along Horseshoe Lake Drive had low usage, and the lack of sidewalks caused accessibility issues. Hobson's Lake Drive, in contrast, has sidewalks and a higher density of employers, including the Canada Revenue Agency office. This change will add minimal travel time and will enhance safety, accessibility, and transit coverage within Bayers Lake. The second stage of the Route 21 modifications came to us through the community engagement process. We had heard there was a lot of demand for transit access to the newly opened retail center at Market Way Lane, including the Sobeys. The challenge here was designing a route that provides access from either side of this development. So if you're west of it or east of it, you can still get there. We ultimately came up with the idea of branching the route into the 21A and the 21B. The 21A would use the direct routing, while the 21B would make a mid-route loop to serve this shopping district. The schedule will alternate between each branch to provide 30-minute frequency along the combined corridor and 60-minute frequency to the Market Way Lane section. We believe this solution provides residents with the option of either direct trips and the access to the jobs and retail at Market Way Lane, as well as letting us adjust service in the future if demand to Market Way Lane grows. So those were just 2 of the major changes proposed in the core service plan. The rest are outlined in the implementation timeline, which includes other minor routing adjustments and service increases. For year 1, we are implementing changes that are feasible to do right now with our current resources and fleet. This includes increasing service on Route 5 during Sundays, adjusting Route 24's schedule to improve on-time performance, a routing change to 165 to restore service to Portland Estates, and a service pattern change to Route 330 to bypass Sheldrick Lake Park and Ride on some trips to improve travel times, which was based on feedback from passengers. In year 2, the changes will require additional service hours and fleet. These include service increases on routes 3, 28, 9A and B, 56, 91, and 194, and changes on many express routes to accommodate workers with earlier and later shifts. This year is also when the new Route 95, as well as the modifications to Route 21, are proposed to be implemented. We are also proposing routing changes to routes 56, 93, and 192. Finally, we are proposing 24-hour service on Route 320, which we'll provide more details on in an upcoming slide. These changes would be included in an upcoming annual service plan, subject to resource availability. During year 3, we are proposing service increases to Route 8 and a weekend service increase to Route 91. Routes 54 and Routes 55 are proposed to be extended to service the new developments in Port Wallace. This is contingent on the completion of the road network there. During year 3, this is when we intend to start work on the next core service plan. Finally, we are going to go over the changes for the Route 320. Route 320 is an important regional connection between Halifax, Dartmouth, and the airport. The airport and associated businesses operate 24 hours, so there's been demand for overnight service to provide access during these times. Since the 320 already has a long service span, only a few additional trips would be needed to operate 24-hour service. However, this would mean a significant operational change for Halifax Transit, with many considerations to figure out before implementation. Despite this, it's an exciting opportunity to introduce 24-hour transit service to Halifax for the first time ever, and it allows us to explore the feasibility of future 24-hour services. Additionally, we were previously asked to create a report on diverting this route to serve the commercial center of Fall River, which takes advantage of the new Aerotech connector. We found that the extended travel times and the cost of this diversion would impact the performance of this route for existing riders, as well as impact its role as a key regional connection. So we ultimately did not recommend this change. More details are provided in the core service plan and strategic roadmap report. However, we will be presenting transit service options for Fall River as part of the microtransit service plan, which will be presented later today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruben, Paul, and Patricia, and the entire team. This was a major project, I know, involved work all across Halifax Transit. So thank you for being here today. And do we have questions? Could I ask someone to put the motion on the floor, please? Thank you, Mayor Fillmore.
The real question is, can I find the motion, Councillor? Okay, thank you. Okay, I move that the Transportation Standing Committee recommend that Regional Council 1 approve the strategic roadmap that is attached to the staff report dated February 3, 2026 as a planning framework to guide the growth and development of public transit services in the short term. 2, approve the core service plan that is attached to the staff report dated February 3rd, 2026. And 3, direct the CAO to prepare for the implementation of proposed network and service changes outlined as recommendations within the core service plan, subject to future budget and resource availability.
Second that.
Thank you so much.
Seconded by Deputy Mayor Cuttle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I may carry on, just to begin to acknowledge and thank this team for the significant work involved in this plan and the work you presented today. A lot of gratitude. Thank you so very, very much for that. You'll not be surprised, because you would have heard this, that Halifax right now is ranked as the 3rd most congested city in the country from that TomTom report. And not surprising then that a recent survey by the rental housing providers of Nova Scotia found that 3/4 of our residents view traffic congestion as their primary concern, and 3/4 also express a desire for expanded and improved transit initiatives as a primary place to spend money for the municipality. So your report and your work, I think, is speaking directly to what people in our community are feeling and in fact saying. So thank you very much for that. Just 2 quick questions for you, and they both regard buses. The first is, at the budget committee, we're talking about ways to make our capital budget more manageable. And one of those ways is to adjust the pace and scale of our capital budget. So on the pace question, what would it mean for your plan if we were to stretch the capital purchase of buses out over a longer period of time? If you could just speak to that. And then the second one was on your mention in the report of the potential of cost sharing for electric buses. Just to expand on that, the likelihood of that, is it a certainty, or is it a wish, or where on that spectrum are we on cost sharing? Thank you so much.
Certainly, I'll take those questions. So in terms of the implementation, what we've presented in the core service plan is based on what was shown in the out years last year in the capital plan, which is growth at a rate of 10 buses a year. So it would require 30 new buses to achieve everything in this plan. But that can be stretched or condensed at the will of regional council based on the resources required. So if there were to be 30 buses over 4 years or 5 years, we would just implement at that pace, and it is flexible in that way. To the second question about cost sharing, so my understanding is that there are some newer funds potentially available in the near future through the Canada Public Transit Fund that could potentially help fund electric or zero emission vehicles. There's no certainty with that yet. I think we don't have anything firm at this moment. I think it would be our intention to seek external funding, but I don't think we have anything confirmed now.
Thank you very much.
Next up is Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, everyone, for this work. I know we've been talking about, and residents have been talking about for a long time, how we need to have some improvements, and I'm just really grateful for the minds that are sitting here among us that have created this. There's a lot of information to digest and unpack. So I'm going to go right to the heart of my District 3 thing so that I can quickly understand, hopefully, what exactly are you saying that could happen? Because I see here, I see that, and it was referenced, the Portland, the number 5, it's referenced several times, Portland Estates, and then Eastern Passage to Portland Hills, and then Woodside Eastern Passage, Heritage Hills to Wrights Cove. But I can't seem to find something that is somewhat of a map to help me understand where those would be, what it could look like, particularly the Portland Hills one, sorry, the Portland Estates one, because we've had some routes removed, and I just wonder if we're going to be able to, if there's somewhere where I can see what those each would look like. And if this is something you can send me, or I can allow, just encourage others to go ahead of me, then I can come back if I can get that information. But generally speaking, I want to say, I think the priority here for us at council is to invest in transit right now when we can, as we go forward. We have a city that has the bones, but we have to grow. And that means our transit has to grow. We have to grow smart. And we have to adapt to different ways that we do things. I really appreciate the direct corridors to workplaces. Those are critically important. I happen to have a district that has, when you look at the map now on our website, you don't see a lot of transit in it by comparison to some of the other clusters of housing and such. And so these direct routes are really, really important. So I'll leave it there, but I would ask if somebody could get me some kind of a map that I'm a visual person to help me understand. And then also, and I don't know if I'm running out of time. No, I still have lots of time. When these ones might occur, because I saw the number 5, for instance, right at the top, one of the first things we could do, and that includes something related to Portland Estates, but I don't quite understand what it is that you're saying, because I find this report rather all over the place, but good. Just I don't know how to connect the dots in it yet. Thank you.
Sure. Through the chair to the counselor, and I don't know if the clerk's office can share the screen again because I have the map up. The first one, I guess the easiest part of your answer is related to the Route 165, and
Okay.
I don't know if you can see that on the screen over here, but the route currently runs straight down Portland Street. So the recommendation is to take it down through Portland Estates and back up onto Portland Street. So this section would be new, and the
okay.
dash line is Portland Street, and the new section is in bold, so where it goes down through Portland
Okay.
Estates. So that would provide peak hour service to that neighborhood.
And that's in our report?
That's in there, and it would be planned for year 1.
Perfect.
One of the other changes you mentioned was the Route 5, so that would be increased service on Sundays. So there's not really a map for that because it's an increased service. That one was really about a lot of people's transfers and their connections, and the service levels were so low that the transfers are really challenging on Sundays. Some of the other things you mentioned are in, and also if you want to take a closer look at that map that I have on the screen, it's on page 23 of the core service plan.
23.
There are other things you mentioned, I think, are on page 33 and thereabouts. Those are concepts that we explored that were raised by the public, but they're not recommended in the life of this plan, largely due to resource availability.
Okay, that's a disappointing answer because that's often what I hear for all of these is resourcing. And I sit here and I represent those areas. And council, this is for you. I'm sitting here representing an area that is being told constantly that we don't have the resources to do it, yet we have lots of resources to go everywhere else. So I just want you to be aware of that. And that's a hard one to swallow, but thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Cuddle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, so very exciting being able to look at the core service plan. Not something we do every day, and get to see some positive changes there. I want to just mention that 9A, 9B on Herring Cove Road, nearly 7,000 boardings a day on that route. One of the worst onboarding statistics of our fleet. In fact, in the latest KPIs, it's the only one that's gone significantly up from what did it go from 62 overboardings in 24-25 to 130 overboardings in the last in the current KPI report, which of course is, I mean, that's double in terms of overboarding. Sometimes it feels as if the routes that are most successful get penalized for not getting the investment. I don't even know what to say to that. I have high ridership, high demand. I see that in the next year that there is an increase to service, and I just want to emphasize that that can't come soon enough. Getting that in place, because we literally have buses driving by, leaving people standing on the side of the road, and that's given the congestion question. Looking at congestion on Herring Cove Road in particular, I mean, there is no fix to that congestion other than trying to change the statistic in how people get to work. So we need that. We need that increase. The other thing I wanted to just note is I see that there was information gathered about the requests. I hear it a lot, and I'm glad to see that it showed up in your work as well, about connecting Spryfield directly to Lacewood. And it noted that there wasn't enough density along that Dumbreck corridor to kind of support that. But I see that route as being more than just simply the density. It comes back to the overloading and the on-time performance, and that you have people needing to go down Herring Cove Road to Mumford to then kind of go back up to Bayers Lake. And as you mentioned with the new route proposed for Brookline, the Brookline route, it's because not everybody wants to go downtown. I also want to note that there's several apartment buildings that are being built along that Dumbreck corridor now. And so in terms of density, I mean, even though it's single loaded, there is a lot of density there compared to single family home, like R1 neighborhoods. You got a lot of apartments. I mean, is that something we can look at in the future? I hear that a lot from people who work in Bedford, work in Clayton Park, work in Bayers Lake. I always use my daughter's friend, her name's Natea. It takes her an hour and a half to get to Old Navy for a 3-hour shift and an hour and a half back. She's spending as much time getting there as she is working. It doesn't seem reasonable when it's only a 15-minute drive. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Austin. I'm sorry. I didn't hear the question.
The question was about the crosstown connector. That's going to be looked at in future.
Crosstown connector.
Yeah, from Spryfield to Lacewood.
I'm able to take that question through the chair to the councillor. We did note it in the report because we recognise the merit of such a proposal. And just a reminder that the Route 95 Brookline is actually combined. We put two proposals forward, a route from Ragged Lake through Bayers Lake to Lacewood, and then from Lacewood up to West Bedford. And so it's the combination of both of those, hence the reason it's configured in such a way. But we will certainly take that suggestion on and we'll take a look at it.
All right. Thank you.
No worries.
Thank you. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Ms. Chair, and thank you, staff, for the work that's gone in here. I have just two main questions, and the one might feed into the second one. you know, there's lots of good stuff here. Our challenges are resources. And I'm wondering if, because there didn't seem to be much enthusiasm for going and looking at reallocation of stuff that we already have. Do we really not have any routes out there that are underperforming, that are not meeting our measures?
I'll take that question. So we did include a chart in the staff report.
Yeah, and all of them basically have a reason why it's a bad idea.
That's right. So we did. I'll be honest. When we started the Moving Forward Together plan a decade ago, we didn't go into it expecting to cut entire routes or portions of routes, and we did cut more than we expected with that. But in the interim, not through strategic planning, but through regular process, we also cut the Route 178 and 179, and we also cut the Route 57. And I think we've been asked kind of every year, is there anything else we could possibly cut? So I feel like most of the either routes or low performing sections have been removed in the last decade as routes have been truncated. So what we're left with is, you know, a network that makes sense together. And some of the examples on the page I wouldn't want to call out, but would leave, you know, kind of awkward gaps in neighborhoods in areas where everyone around them has service and they don't, or it would cut service off entirely. So as part of the core service plan this time, you're correct, we're not proposing anything be cut.
Okay. So then if there's not really anything we can cut, then we're left with potentially putting more in. There's another piece, which is, you know, the traffic that we're all talking about. We have to run more buses to provide the same service levels if the bus is spending half its time sitting in traffic. How does that, you know, like that, which I know is complex, involving road engineering, how does that factor into what we're doing? Because we could buy you know, 30 more buses to do the plan, but we're throwing those buses into the same traffic mess that we already have, that's causing the whole network to become more and more inefficient.
That's a great question. So the Route 24 in particular, we've kind of called out for exactly that it just needs to be rescheduled as is due to the congestion. And there is a line in the core service plan that speaks a bit to service reliability. What we've done historically, if you were around for a bit during the Moving Forward Together plan, we come forward with, these are the routes that are getting restructured and are new. Here's 5 routes this quarter that are getting schedule adjustments and upgrades. And so that also does take resources. And that is a bit built into the plan, that there would be, you know, for every 10 buses, there is like half a bus to a bus worth of just schedule tweaks and adjustments wherever they're needed to make the running times work. Although I think it's maybe part of a broader conversation related to the service reliability review that we're not here with today, but you know, what is the actual increase we would need to just keep pace with congestion at this rate year over year? So this really just builds in a tiny bit to keep making schedule adjustments as we can.
I guess my main point there is throwing more buses into the heap to just have them sit in traffic is counterproductive, when what we really need is to get the bus out of the traffic. So then instead of 10 to do the job, you could run with 8 or 9, because it's not losing all the time in traffic, right? Like, I mean, Bridge Bus Lane being a wonderful example of, they all just, you know, absolutely convoying coming out of Thistle now because they can't jump to the head of the queue anymore. Budget-wise, my last kind of question, since I know the road piece is tough, if, you know, if we wanted to do the opposite of what the mayor's suggesting, if we wanted to provide you with monies to speed up implementation, so it's not just the existing resources, could you actually do anything this year? And maybe this is a budget committee sort of question.
We could, if there was funding in 26-27, we could do some of the changes, yes.
So I'll leave that for everyone to mull on. We could decide to do this now rather than wait. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor White.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone, for the presentation. And thank you, Councillor Austin, for hitting one of the items I was thinking about. So great, we could fund this now. I would like to follow up on, you made it very clear in the report in your presentation that traffic congestion is the main problem with on-time performance. I noticed in the chart that the only year buses met the on-time target of 85% was during COVID, when, of course, there were less people driving. And that correlates with our road safety stats as well. It's the only time we've seen a decrease is during those years when there was less driving. So my question is, why hasn't reallocation of more lanes where we do have roads that have multiple lanes on them? Why isn't that suggested as part of this plan to reallocate general traffic lanes to bus lanes? Thanks.
Through the chair, I think the short answer for that is it wouldn't have been in the scope of this core service plan and is kind of a broader municipal undertaking.
Okay, so that's something we'd have to look at separately from that answer. And then I want two more thoughts where it talks about anticipated resources, and I think maybe we've already hit on that, but I was just wondering, are those resources scarce because of council or the market? Just touch on that. And then I also just noticed that the boardings were down for Halifax, and if you could comment on that. Thank you.
Sure. Related to resources, I'm not entirely sure where the reference was in the document, but the resources to implement this really are physical buses and then the operating costs to operate them. And that includes, for fuel source and maintenance and operators to drive them. So it really does come down to operating budget as well as capital to purchase vehicles.
Okay, so budget, not necessarily that you can't hire people.
Right.
Okay, great. Yeah, and then the Halifax boardings. That was the only place that ridership seems to have gone down.
So I think one of the reasons that we're seeing decreased boardings in Halifax is we're seeing a lot more jobs and people choosing to live in the suburbs. So, I mean, we heard this during engagement that a lot of people are trying to get to their jobs in Bayers Lake. They're working in Burnside. I think overall the development pattern of the city is becoming less focused on downtown, and there's more happening in the suburbs.
Did you get feedback to suggest that, or is that an assumption? I'm just like, I often don't take the bus because it's faster to walk or something. Thank you.
I can take that question through the chair to the councillor. We did hear quite a lot of feedback from folks in our engagement that people are travelling in different ways across the network. And I think that's what we tried to illustrate within the strategic roadmap document itself, is we're seeing lots of traditional patterns kind of maintaining. So boardings in Halifax are still quite high and the highest percentage across the network. But we are definitely seeing folks who are travelling across the region on transit to get to work and for other daily trips.
Okay, great. Yeah, I definitely think transit should be able to be used to go from anywhere to anywhere in HR. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up is Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for this. This was a big transit weekend. Lots of transit reading this weekend. Finished your KPI report while watching the Super Bowl last night, so I'm glad it wasn't a great game because I was able to concentrate. I would have been really distracted if the Patriots had done way better. Okay, so thanks for this. This was the first time I've read transit reports and was actually excited and optimistic about the future. So this is great. I really feel like feedback was taken seriously from the big outreach you did in the fall. And I guess just commenting on others, following up on others' comments too, that cross-community thing, I was a little disappointed to see that we don't have anything from Cole Harbour to Dartmouth Crossing, because patterns have changed, travel patterns have changed, people's work has changed. We need more of those easy cross-community networking connections, because just like Deputy Mayor was talking about, a 15-minute drive taking an hour and a half on the bus. Well, that's the same with us towards the Dartmouth crossing. So it would be the same as, where are you? Spryfield, right? Brain dead. To Bayers Lake. So, but still great improvements here. I did have a question, because I know in the Moving Forward Together plan, the focus was on shorter trips, more transfers. And I know that's always been a negative feedback I've heard from transit users, because it is inconvenient when you're carrying like babies and bags, and and also with the weather, and also with the inconsistency or the service reliability. You can be left waiting for your next bus if you've missed that transfer. So where does I didn't, or I missed it if it was in here, but like has that changed at all in this new core service plan? I love that the new way of addressing transit is shorter, more adaptive service plans, as opposed to we are locked in for like 10 years on something, and when people are not, their needs are not being addressed. So I think that is a great way to move forward, especially when we've seen, our whole world's change in the last 5-6 years. So I think that's a very smart way to do it. I'm really concerned about the cost of everything, and we don't want to not do anything. We want to do it all. We want to do it all at the best in the Cadillac version. And I don't know how any of this is going to be sustainable, but transit is one of our core services as the municipality. Transportation is imperative to people's quality of life and their work and their recreation and just their whole quality of life. So transit, very, very important. So have more to say about the money thing on our budget deliberations on this, but very happy to support this. And I guess that was kind of my comments on this core service plan right now. But yet the short transfers, how is that addressed moving forward?
I'll be happy to take the first part of that, and I might defer to Patricia at a certain point. But through the chair to the councillor, we certainly heard from engagement from folks around your communities that you have highlighted, but also beyond that across the region. And it's been tied often to increase in service requests, but also concerns around delays in the network and being able to make those connections. So we didn't hear so much about people being concerned about making the transfer, but about just missing their connection or having extended waits throughout their travel, and the need to sort of leave earlier to get to wherever they need to be on time. And so so we certainly have noted that, and we sort of factored that into some of our service increases, particularly. I think we heard about that around Route 93. So not in your area necessarily, but certainly Route 5 was one of those ones that we were keen to sort of make a change on.
Okay, so more strategically targeted then to address some of the high priority corridors. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Steele, you're next.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and thanks for the report. I have a lot of micro questions, so I'll try to go quickly. Are we committee of the whole or no? Not yet. Okay, I'll be quick. So I was very excited to see a number of the routes in Clayton Park, Wedgwood, and Beachville Lakeside, Timberley mentioned. First question I have is related to the number 21. Just around 21 and overcrowding on Sundays, you reference. I'm wondering about overcrowding on weekdays as well. Was that looked at, considered, or maybe that's just the request that I received from residents and it's not an issue? So that's the first one. 21AB, that sounds very interesting. And certainly, I know there's been a lot of demand for transit to on Marketway Lane to allow residents to access Sobeys. Now we have the Mayflower Curling Club there. There's a McDonald's gas station, lots of opportunities for youth to be employed there. So I'm encouraged to look at this. It'll be interesting to see how residents react, those that are used to taking the more direct route on the St. Margaret's Bay Road. I have a bunch, 330 Sheldrake Lake, skipping there every, some of the time. I know volume has not been high there based on my understanding, so that's perhaps the reason, but maybe you'll comment on that. And in terms of the 95 and Chain Lake Drive, you highlight the significant investment that would need to be made there for adding bus stops, sidewalks, making it safer. We know that Chain Lake Drive, in terms of sidewalks and accessibility and vulnerable road users, is a key issue not only for transit but for other forms of, but for walking, etc. So maybe you can comment on some of those initially.
Okay, I'll start and then probably pass the first question over to Ruben. I'll work backwards maybe. The Route 95 on Chain Lake Drive, I think it is good to highlight that. One of the challenges there is there's some businesses people are trying to get to and they're up a big hill and there's no sidewalk, and a lot of residents have asked us for some time to have service back there. So we did cost that a bit differently in that we know we will need bus stop infrastructure, and we don't typically install any bus stops unless we can make them fully accessible, which means an accessible path of travel, which doesn't necessarily mean full sidewalks on the whole thing. Often what we do is we do a short piece of sidewalk to the nearest intersection. There's not a lot of intersections there either. So what that might mean is that when that route is initially implemented, there may be fewer bus stops than you would typically expect, because the bus stops we put in are likely going to be expensive and it might be really hard to even find appropriate places for them. So it is a bit of a barrier to having the service there, but there's a lot of requests for it. So we have included it in the plan. The Route 330 skipping Sheldrake Lake, when the service was launched and until the pandemic, there were only certain trips that went to Sheldrake Lake. It doesn't have very high ridership relative to Tantallon, and when trips were pulled out during the pandemic, we realized that, if there was normally a dozen trips in the morning and 6 of them went to Sheldrake Lake, we're pulling out trips so only maybe 2 did. So we changed the schedule so that every trip went to Sheldrake Lake because we were on a reduced schedule. And then it kind of stayed that way. So we've asked the community about it, and we're suggesting we go back to only having some strategic trips at Sheldrake Lake, just for that time savings, and because quite often there's no one boarding or alighting there. The Route 21AB is very interesting, and I will say that it is not an ideal situation from a transit planning perspective. It is very challenging, the way the road network is designed. It's very challenging to deviate people from their existing route on St. Margaret's Bay Road up to the commercial center. And so we tried to balance that with the requests and the needs of the community to access that. A loop in the middle of a route, especially for folks that are almost home and then have that extra time, we really struggled with in terms of whether to introduce it or not, which is why you're left with an AB option, so that some trips can be more direct, and it gives us, I think, a bit of flexibility in the future. If there's a lot of ridership in the new section, then maybe eventually every trip goes there if that's the main driver and it's an important way people get around the community. But without introducing that, we think there are challenges not being able to access it, and especially because there is quite a hill as well, so it's kind of an accessibility around the community challenge. But we will definitely be watching that, and if implemented, we'll be interested in the feedback we hear from residents, because it is challenging either way to not service it or to service it. It's really not an ideal situation. And I'll let Ruben comment on the Route 21 capacity on weekdays.
Through the chair to council. Yeah, so we did look at the overloads for Route 21, and like we found in 2025, we have actually 21 overloads on Route 21. That is like, it's not one of the highest ones. We also found that a lot of these overloads are occurring around Lacewood Terminal, and they're occurring in the Bayers Lake area. So given that, we are increasing service on Route 28, and we're also introducing the new Route 95, which serves the main, like all these routes serve like the main commercial area of Bayers Lake. So we are thinking that by introducing these extra services, it will relieve some of the capacity from the Route 21 and allow people with extra travel options to Bayers Lake and hopefully mitigate some of those overloads. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Next is Councillor Daigle-Gammon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the report. It's good for everybody except those who live in Fall River. So I do want to share, and I did talk to Patricia about this. So one of the things that really bothered me about this is that I made the motion to have the 320 look. We waited to see that in Report Center it was pushed out, it was pushed out, it was pushed out. And 2 days before this meeting, like sort of Thursday or Friday, to find out that the response got buried in this larger report, didn't give the community time to really look at this report. We're in the middle of budget, so you're looking at 2 reports, 100 pages. We've got all kinds of emails have come to members of the Transportation Standing Committee because they're very upset. We made a commitment to them that there was going to be a report, that we were going to look at it, and here we are, public participation on a Monday at 1 o'clock with a day's notice before a weekend. It's not like people could come here and make a presentation in terms of public participation. So, in some ways I feel like transit is a place that, things get buried somehow. It's bothersome. It's very bothersome to me. And then when you look at the report, well, for the next 3 years, there's not even a mention that we would look at any kind of transit expansion to Fall River unless it's within the microtransit plan, and that's not even recommended for the initial pilot. So that's not so good. So transit being a core service, well, it's a core service for some. It's not a core service for all of the residents of HRM, so it's unacceptable, it really is. One of the things in the report that it does say that, the ridership is only 14% going up to the park and ride. Well, that's because you're taking your life in your hands to walk up to it. So no, people are not going to be walking up to the park and ride. People do, because they have to. Otherwise, if you're driving, you're going to have to, by the time you get up there, well, you might as well just go to town. So it is bothersome for me to see that. To reroute the 320 would cost $600,000 in 10 minutes. Well, there's a couple of places in the report, and when you were speaking, you say, well, it's just a minimal travel time, so it's okay. So what's minimal travel time? Like less than 10 minutes? I would like to know what that is. And then if it was the microtransit, and if you look at the microtransit report and the alternative, then that cost is $1.1 million. So the difference between $600,000 in 10 minutes or a microtransit, and the microtransit does build out bigger than what the rerouting of the 320 would be. But really, it's the rerouting and just coming down in is what the initial request is. So, we'll figure out where we get to with all of this, but it just doesn't, it's just very uncomfortable to be in this position and to see it folded into a report that doesn't look like it's got the attention that I think that it should have gotten. The 24/7 to the airport, that's great. I mean, I've seen people in the airport sleeping between shifts because they're not being able to get back to wherever their home is. But the interesting piece is, that even the rerouting, if you live in Sackville and you have to take the bus, you've got to go into Halifax and come all the way around in order to get to the airport. So, and I think the last time I talked to somebody who did that, it was well over 2 hours. So yeah, we're not connected in terms of a transit plan at all. We want to take more cars off the road than we need to give more transit. So that's my rant. God love you, Patricia. You've had to listen to it a couple of times, but thank you.
I think there was a question in there.
What's minimal?
Yeah.
What is minimal? I think I'm not sure where the reference was to minimal. I think the challenge with transit costs are quite often, things that are just a kilometer away or whatnot. I think it depends on the service levels and the frequencies. And the reason the Fall River one would cost so much is because the route does run 7 days a week for a longer day than most routes. So it starts earlier in the morning than anything else and is one of the last ones back. So when we start multiplying by the number of trips, it escalates the cost on that route more than maybe in some other routes. So there's no real definition of minimal, maybe not our best word choice, but hopefully that answers the question.
I'm out of time, but it was just the fact that it got lost in it, because if you had looked at it, you could have looked at different times that the 320 could be diverted down onto Highway 2 instead of for every route, and that would have made it more acceptable. Thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Hartley.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And if I could follow Councillor Daigle-Gammon's, profound disappointment. I mean, if you're in Prospect or St. Margaret's Bay, this represents a letdown. Even when I look into the microtransit report, Prospect is not represented there at all. So there's no future, looking at, despite even having, Ragged Lake, the Ragged Lake bus depot being in District 13, there's no actual transit for District 13, with the exception of way up in Tantallon. So to kind of start off, my question is, and if I could, not that I would speak for Councillor Hensby, because goodness knows he can speak for himself, but are park and rides considered as part of a long-term strategy? Like I wonder whether we're ever going to get there with the plans that we have now. So that would be my first question. Are we thinking about ways that we can collect people? Because I don't see how this is going to work by any other means. In discussions, like we met previously, and one of the challenges for Prospect is that there is so little transit infrastructure that there's nothing for you to build upon. So my question is, when you're looking at how we understand transit in the future, are you thinking about those opportunities for people to collect to start to make it make sense? Because, like I said, if what I'm looking at here is it's hard. If I could start there. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Regarding park and rides specifically, I think we didn't address them in this plan. We had, in the Moving Forward Together plan a decade ago, outlined some infrastructure needs. One was Wrights Cove Terminal, which is yet to be built, and the other was the Murchison Drive Park and Ride, which is also yet to be built. I think probably showing in the out years in the capital plan still. So we haven't recommended any more yet. I think that probably is overdue in terms of looking more broadly at the longer term growth of the region and where they could be. But in the short term, we don't have any new park and rides proposed other than the Murchison Drive one, which has been kind of on the books for a long time. And you hit the nail on the head with park and rides, that they're only effective if there's a high level of transit service there, so it's attractive to park there, which is challenging when we have demand for transit service all over the region all of the time, and so much pressure for increases. The other part about park and rides is, it does require you to drive to get to them first. So in the kind of urban and suburban areas, we would prefer to have transit going past people's homes, but the case for them is kind of on that outer periphery, more for our rural or some suburban areas. But I guess the short answer is we have we have very little solid plans to expand park and rides right now, and we haven't delivered on the one that we were committed to a long time ago.
Okay, thank you. Next up is Councillor Saint-Amand.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you very much for how thoroughly you went through all the various different options for us. I'm in the enviable position of having a park and ride that will wind up having its status elevated a little bit with some of the proposals that you've put forward. It seems like Route 95 will wind up being very well received. My only source of disappointment is that we may not necessarily take action on something like that right away. It all depends on what we figure we can handle from a resourcing perspective. But I think that route addition winds up further amplifying the importance of the park and ride at Innovation Drive. And I think one of the things that it will wind up doing is proving what kind of impact transit can have on clusters of population within our suburban area. West Bedford is name-checked quite a number of times in this report as a growing area that has a high degree of transit demand. And so as we continue to build out that area, I think the more transit service we can throw at it, the more cars we're going to wind up taking off the road. So that really does help quite a bit with regard to our congestion. I'm curious if there's really two questions I have. On that front, I'm curious about whether or not you're also further considering consolidation of routing. I know you've done some of that to a degree. In some cases, you've extended some routes. In other cases, trimmed them down. There were two that were on the list of ones that were underperforming but not recommended to remove. And I note that the Hemlock Ravine Express and the Basin View Express overlap considerably to an extremely high degree from the time they hit the 102 all the way down to downtown. I'm curious if a further consolidation of that route may have been considered in order to save on costs, because they both have fairly high operating costs relative to their cost capture. And with the overlap seeming that they serve a very similar audience, it just so happens that the Basin View one continues across the rest of Bedford, whereas the Hemlock Ravine one starts and ends at the park and ride. So I'm curious if there's some ability to collapse those into a single route, because it looks like even the timing on the route is very similar. And my second question is just a little bit more broadly. How are we managing the investment allocation in the services that we have within the routes that we have? I'm thinking specifically about some of the challenges that we've had mechanically with the ferries recently. And so do we have enough resources to throw at solving those part issues? I mean, I know in a lot of cases it has to do with suppliers not being able to provide the parts in the time expected. But does that complicate our ability to deliver on promises of expansions of our routing network for residents when we've got these other complicating factors that are slowing down performance in other areas?
Sure. I would say I'll start at the end again. The short answer to your second question is no. I mean, the ferry service is certainly an important integrated part of the network, but it wouldn't necessarily impact the ability to expand the bus network. I think that was your question. The consolidating of routing, we did not consider that. The express routes are interesting, and I guess if we look at Sackville as a comparison instead, there's quite a few routes that are the same from Sackville Terminal all the way downtown and along the corridors downtown, and just serve slightly different neighborhoods in Sackville. The intent of those is in the suburban areas where they serve, they're filling up with residents there, and they're getting a direct trip to downtown. So if those routes and the ones in the report in the table for reductions, they're still relatively new, and we know that the district is still growing a lot. With express routes, we do have some ability to trim individual trips off if they're not performing, or kind of right size the service. So if they were continuing to underperform over time, we could look at reductions, but the intent really is that the 192 is for one neighborhood and the 196 and the 194 are for two different neighborhoods. further supplemented by if they go to the park and ride by people who are park and riding as well. But they do have slightly different catchment areas.
Yeah, I noticed that they don't both go to the park and ride, but they're inches apart, really, because the park and ride and where the Basin View Express comes down and connects right to the 102, they're right next to the park and ride anyway. So I was just curious whether or not something like that had been considered, because honestly, when I look at the map for the Basin View Express, it really just looks like an extended version of the Hemlock Ravine Express. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Councillor Gillis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you guys for the presentation. What I really want to ask about is microtransit. I'm glad to see route number 8 getting addressed. Find that's some good news.
I'm sorry, Councillor Gillis. That's actually the next item on the agenda. So I ask you to keep your questions to the core services plan, if you could.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to be able to be here, so if you wouldn't mind.
Sorry, we can't do it that way. It's going to throw off our agenda. As it is, we're going to have to extend the meeting past 3 o'clock.
Okay, I'll come back.
Thank you. So next is Councillor Young.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Robin, Patricia, and the team. I suppose I could say it's works for everybody but the people in Lucasville, the people in Popcock Road or Upper Hammonds Plains, but I'm not going to say that. I think the report is good. It's a starting point. I just have 3 questions or 3 inquiries. Is there a spot there where if people are doing shift work, that there's a last bus consideration beyond the last bus right now? Like, I don't know when it ends, 12:30, 1 o'clock. Is there a consideration for that? Number 2, the OTPs. You went from 88% in 2021 to 69%. I believe is it currently or last year? So what specifically is being done to improve this? Some specifics. And my third one is, it's a service boundary inquiry. Because we're talking about traffic congestion, vehicles on the road. So would the amendment of the transit service boundary solve some of the traffic congestion from areas not yet being serviced, as a large number of these traffic congestions and vehicles are coming from outside the current service boundary? So if you could address those 3, I'd much appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay, in terms of the last bus at night, the only later service proposed in this plan is for the Route 320 to the airport. That wasn't something we heard a lot from residents this time. And when we did the Moving Forward Together plan implementation over the last number of years, a lot of buses that used to end at 8 at night or at 10 at night, most of them were extended at least until 10, but more go later than they used to a decade ago. So we didn't hear that in the same way this time. The service boundary, I think I think what your question maybe is really getting to is, if more transit is offered in more areas, then yes, that can help be part of the solution to addressing congestion. I don't know if it's necessarily tied to the service boundary directly, and I think the part of the answer is as well, to offer more service in more areas require more and more resources, right? So whether the boundary is there, I think it's more about providing the service in more areas, more so than the boundary as a limitation, but that could be part of it as well. And the last one about on-time performance, I mean, there have been, in the past few years, there's been quite a few schedule updates done and adjustments made, trying to make sure the schedules are more accurate and have recoup time to get the next trip back on schedule. The other things we've been doing through budget last year, Council gave us some resources to try to manage and address some of the challenges. What some of that may look like, though, is if there are trips and buses getting stuck in congestion, then another helper trip, if you will, is going to help. So it doesn't really address the congestion. It helps us try to improve the reliability of the service, but the congestion is still there.
So I'm not sure of the bus number. It's either 83 or 93. I'm not sure. The one that goes across, the one that actually goes across Lucasville Road, that one, up to Middle Sackville. So what is the stats on that for ridership? That bus is usually almost empty every time I see it.
I guess we could send you a chart with the ridership at different times of day.
Okay.
So that would be the Route 83 and 183. Certainly
Yes.
does better at peak times as the 183 coming all the way downtown. It is one of the lower of the suburban routes. I'd say it's lower than the 185 or 186. It is one of the lower suburban routes that we have.
But before it changes over, when it's the 83, that's what I'm talking about. The one that goes up to Middle Sackville and comes back to the terminal. That one's almost always empty.
Yeah.
I've been watching it, just to let you know. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I have a committee member motion to extend the meeting? Councillor Austin, and seconded by Councillor Purdy. Thank you. Next up is, sorry, we have to vote on that? Could we have show of hands, please? Great, carried, thank you. Next is Councillor Hinch.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Following up on Councillor Young's question, what time does ridership, what time does it end? Like, when's the last bus end? I didn't quite hear it.
I think it depends on the route. I think the last route 8 is probably the last one back to the garage, and it's after 2 in the morning. So the routes 1 to 10 theoretically run a bit longer than the rest, ending somewhere between midnight and 1 in the morning, and other routes may kind of trickle off after 10 p.m.
Okay. Because I received quite a few complaints with regards to people that do work downtown area, especially in bars, trying to get home like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Lots of complaints about those, not being able to access a bus at that time. So I don't know if there's anything that can be done with regards to having a few local routes become 24-hour routes.
So that is in I think some of the last pages of the core service plan. I don't have it open to the right page right now, because with this plan, we're really just proposing the Route 320 go overnight. But we do hear about kind of around the clock service from people from time to time, and that is discussed in there as like a future consideration. And the thought was that it will be a bit of a big lift to get to that 24-hour service. Operationally, there's changes in processes, there's shift changes, there's technology changes. But once we are up and running with that, in the future, it may be easier then to look at, what else has merit in going later through the evening.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
On page 34 of the report, but 104, if somebody wants to look it up, it references the strategic roadmap utilizing some of the plans that are coming up, which included microtransit, and it just seems to me that would be a reasonable approach for Councillor Gillis, given that he has to leave. And I wonder if you could give him, it's your consideration, Madam Chair, or you're the chair, you get to decide, but it is there in the core service considerations. About fulfilling guiding principles and improving transit. I just wonder if he could have an opportunity to get back back early, because I know he's pressed in again, but I just think that he should be given an opportunity to speak to it because it's within the report.
Fair enough. Councillor Gillis.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Councillor Kent. Appreciate it. Okay, just a quick question because I do have to go to another meeting. It's regarding the microtransit, and I just want to know, was North Beaver Bank included in the microtransit study?
Through the chair to the councillor, so North Beaver Bank would be in the area we considered on-serviced and not having Halifax Transit Service or a nonprofit provider, and that on-serviced area was the focus of the study. From that area, there were 5 smaller zones recommended for early implementation, but North Beaver Bank would be in the key area that was the focus of the study that would come with phase 3.
With phase 3?
That's correct.
Is there any timeline on phase 3?
No. I mean, we haven't presented it yet to Transportation Stand Committee but it is all resource dependent, and the speed of implementation really will depend on how the phases roll out.
So it was not included in the microtransit study, but just the boundary study. Is that kind of what I'm understanding? There's no mention of it in the microtransit study, is why I'm asking.
The councillor is correct that there's no mention of North Beaver Bank in the study. The vision and intent of the study is to provide microtransit in that entire on-serviced area, but it does not name the communities that are within it.
Okay, that's disappointing. I mean, we had transit. We had the oldest transit service in HRM. When amalgamation happened in 1996, it was agreed upon that that transit route was going to keep going. And then in the fall of 2019, we lost it. And you may or may not be aware, but we have 2 full-time film sets out there now, plus a seniors home with a CCA training program that advertises its jobs saying you must have a car to commute. I mean, if our goal here is to get more vehicles off the road and get more people using transit, it would make sense to have this extended back to where it was removed from. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Chair. I have a quick question around the express routes and offering possibly additional trips either earlier or later. And I guess my question is really around, I think we're looking at this for year 2 implementation, but I'm wondering when you're adding trips earlier in the morning or later in the evening, I understand it would require additional personnel, but you would have the buses. So would this be, a more cost-effective way to move more people? I guess I'm wondering is this a candidate for early implementation? And I guess the other thing is, I know from time to time during the year you make changes in routes. You drop a trip or you add a trip. Is there a possibility of any of this, given the extensive feedback you've had about adding more peak time trips for these express routes, and given the volume of people they have tended to move?
Sure, and through the chair, thank you to the councillor for the question. This one is happy to explain a little more. I think it's a little bit confusing. So the express routes now, those that start with number 100, do run during peak periods. As Paul explained, we had a lot more ridership and demand, say from 5 to 6 a.m. than in previous years. And we also quite often have requests for, the one last trip at say 7, shortly after 7 at night. There are a few ways for us to approach these. One thing, if we were looking to move up some of those to help meet passenger demand, we could do that. For example, if there's a trip every 15 minutes from 3 till 6, we could spread out some of those trips maybe after 5 p.m. so they're every 20 minutes. And if we keep the same number of trips, if we're able to kind of spread things out, we could basically pluck a trip out and put it at 7:15. So we could meet some of this, or the same with earlier in the morning. We could do some of it by shifting the resources instead of net new. Adding trips, even if they're outside of peak, does require resources, and even if it's not a peak bus, because for every bus we have, there's a certain value of operating costs that comes with it when we buy it, and also a certain number of kilometers we can run it a year. So as tempting as it is, we can't just, you know, add a lot of service on Sunday because the buses are parked. They also need maintenance at that time, and they do have a limited number of kilometers a year. So if we are looking at for this item, I think it is a mix of shifting trip times around to meet the demand with some additional. So it would be possible to front load some of the shifting to get trips for people earlier on some of those routes where there may be some trips with fewer passengers. So it could be something that could be broken up and phased in differently through the plan if that was desirable.
Okay, no, that's interesting because I know, for example, like the 136, the 138, the 135, there used to be trips at like 6:30 or later in the day, and some of those have been dropped. I think in favor of adding like a 315 so I'd be interested to know the volume and potential volume around some of that. Okay, thanks.
Councillor Cuddle, excuse me.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, good discussion. We like getting into, this is the time I guess we have to get into the weeds of all this. The 24, so lots of talk about the 24 and doing some, I forget what the term was, like route management, scheduling management, based on the performance, the on-time performance of the bus and making some adjustments. That's the bus that goes all the way to the end of Liebland, and Old Sambro. And one of the things that I discussed earlier on with Mr. Giroux was about extending the 24 2 kilometers to Harrietsfield and back, where you have a fairly dense community outside of the service boundary, low income. A lot of people move to there's a very massive trailer park out there. A lot of people move there. It's affordable living. I have families, I have seniors who don't have cars, one-car families, single parents, teenagers who can't get to jobs because they don't have an affordable way in and out. I think when you kind of look at that area from an economic equity lens, it's a lower income community that also has a major employment center right next to it with the Harrietsfield Industrial Park. And with the changes that you're making in the schedule to the 24, was there any consideration about being able to extend that, the 2 kilometers to get to Harrietsfield?
I'm able to take that question. Thank you. And through the chair to the councillor. We did have a couple of concepts or proposals in extending Route 24, including the extension that you refer to. Plus, we also took a couple of proposals to extend Route 24 further into the downtown and to finish at Scotia Square. And so in the process of responding to engagement, hearing from operators as well as operations leadership, the challenges of operating that route as they currently stand was significant enough that we decided not to pursue any further extensions to that route in order to just resolve some of the scheduling issues that we're experiencing on the travel times at present. I can leave it there if you wanted to take it up any further. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so that's where the microtransit then comes in with that last 2 kilometers, and why it's so important to get something in there on the Sambro Loop. Thank you.
I was going to say yes. Thanks for bringing that to my attention. We did actually, in the process of making that analysis, then look at that further in terms of the microtransit service plan.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Ms. Chair. And just one follow-up question regarding, and maybe I've missed this at some point along the way. Could you tell me a little more about the service reliability plan that might be coming forward, what that work is?
Phil Harrott, Director of Transit Operations for Halifax Transit. The service reliability work that's happening now is a shared project between the operations team and our partners in PACE, the planning and customer engagement, work that's happening. And we're looking at where the impacts are happening in the service across the city, whether that's traffic congestion, whether that's scheduling, whether that's interlining, all of those pieces. We're changing how we're capturing data, how we're analyzing that data, looking where it's at, where those alignments are, and where we're starting to see those challenging areas, whether that's how we're getting through the city, how we're scheduling ourselves and things like that. The further we get into it, the more there is to get into it, and we're hoping to come back later this year with a more detailed breakdown of what that looks like, what the challenges and opportunities are there, and how we can start to adjust those pieces. Again, everything from working with our partners in traffic services and HRP, RCMP, in alignment with congestion, how we're putting the work together ourselves, and challenges that we may or may not be seeing from that.
Okay. I didn't, not till the end there did I hear our traffic public works people. Like, what I see the biggest gap in our core service plan right now, like, we can add more service, but if we're just adding service to jam in the same traffic, like, that's inefficient, right? Like, the biggest challenge we have now is the traffic congestion we have in the city, and I'm really not kind of hearing, maybe I'm just kind of looking in the wrong spot, but I would be a whole lot more reassured if I had an answer, or if I'd seen somewhere in the plan the connection we need to have with public works. And I'm not talking like, the dramatic things like, well, maybe we take a whole lane of Portland Street out there where it's 4 lanes wide, or Pleasant, but like even the smaller sort of measures like at traffic lights, these sorts of things, because we can't just, I feel like that piece is missing right now in a big way. And I don't think where we are, we can just hang our hat on, well, BRT will come someday and that'll solve this. I think we need to get to a more tactical place on road prioritizing transit. So I don't know that there's a question there, but I feel like there's a gap in what we have in front of us right now on this. And so maybe we can have some more conversations. Maybe there's some motion in future on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Austin. And if it's okay with committee members, I'd like to ask a question from the chair. Thank you. There are a lot of changes proposed, 21 changes proposed, new routes being proposed to add 24-hour service, increasing the express buses, improving service on the corridor routes as a precursor to BRT. So there's a lot in here. I'm wondering if you could say a little bit more about the importance of adding to the fleet of articulated buses and why that is one of your recommendations. Is our fleet all the same age? Why is it so important that we focus on increasing the articulated buses?
Certainly, and so as part of the recommendation to implement the plan, it's, the vehicles are needed to do so. The recommendation does hinge on articulated buses, and partly because of the high ridership and the demand. So it wouldn't necessarily be the route that's being implemented that gets an articulated bus, but we do need them throughout the network in a lot of areas. And through the life of the plan, I believe the costing reflects 30 expansion vehicles, 15 of which would be articulated and 15 would be 40-foot electric. In the short term, in your year 1 or 2, the diesel articulated buses are likely to be more readily available with zero emission kind of in year 3. So that is part of it, but generally we had looked at our network in I want to say 2018, and thought, what's the ideal number of articulated buses we need right now? And we were at about the right size. We thought, we have 47, and it was, 45 to 50 made sense. With some of the ridership increases we've seen since that time, in an ideal world, our preference would be running significantly more, almost double as many articulated buses, just because of the ridership demand and the overloads that we have.
Okay, thank you very much. So, which problems would they solve? What are they designed to solve? All of the things that you've proposed, some of the things that you've proposed, mostly the overloads, or?
The articulated buses help most significantly with overloads and on the busier corridor routes. So we do tend to use them on, for example, the routes 1 and 9 and 3 is where they are used all day.
That's great. Thank you. All right. I see another question from Councillor White.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to follow up on that service reliability plan. If I could hear more about how that originated, when it's coming, and if that's kind of addressing these questions of queue jumps and dedicated lanes that we're so curious about, because we know they would help.
Thank you, through the chair to the councillor. The service reliability work that we're doing initiated probably about a year and a half ago as we started looking at trying to address some of the conversations in the KPI report around overloads and our kind of hold in the decrease around on-time performance. So we started wanting to see what those things were, that were impacting those. Much like we took a different approach to how we were collecting security data, we changed how we were looking at the data for a combination of the overloads, canceled trips, which are also a challenge with us. So that service that's not getting because the bus is so late or not available or not able to get to that area of town. So we proposed working between operations and specifically the planning section of our PACE department to look at where those challenges were coming from and what we could do to address them. And then in last year's budget, council had provided some resources, some buses and things that we started looking at those. So we created a plan identifying the 10 routes that had the most trip cancellations on, and we started addressing them through there. As we got further into the analysis of the data, we found a few more things to cross-reference, so it's kind of expanded in scope, but solely looking at the service reliability of the service that we have today. So we had not, in that work, which was basically a review of data analysis and our schedules and how we're putting that work together, we had not looked at or intended to look at queue jumps or anything like that. It was solely based on the data and the work that we're doing today with the information we had on where we were seeing challenges both in overloads and in adherence or canceled trip data. And then the intent is to have that come back in which way the quarters work here, quarter 3 this year, as a report.
Okay, thank you. I hear it's coming back in Q3, but if we want infrastructure changes, we need to ask for that separately. Yes, thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other questions on the board. Could I call for the question? And yes, just a reminder that only TSC members can vote on this. So all those in favor? Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thanks everyone. That brings us to our next report, 13.12 Microtransit Service Plan. And perhaps we'll take a 5 or 10 minute break and come back at 20 after 3. Thank you. Thank you. There we go. Yeah, I just think we need a. Hmm? Okay. So I'll call the meeting back to order, if I could, from the break. Yeah, I'm gonna have to get my hammer out. Thank you. We're calling the meeting back to order after a short break. We're at 13.12, the Micro Transit Service Plan, and staff are here with a presentation. Welcome back, Patricia Hughes and Nick Cuthbertson.
Thank you. I guess we'll jump right in. So, as the chair just said, I'm Patricia Hughes, the Director of Planning and Customer Engagement. I'm here with Nick Cuthbertson, who's the project manager, to present the Micro Transit Service Plan. As we get started, I'd like to just start first with how we got here. It was back in April 2023 that Council approved a motion regarding a review of gaps in rural service and conducting a service needs analysis. That led to a staff report that was brought forward in June 2025, which seems like yesterday, but was about half a year ago, that had multiple recommendations. The Microtransit Service Plan was one of 6 recommendations on that report, and that's what we're bringing forward today. It's the first and perhaps one of the most impactful recommendations coming out of that report. The plan has also been shaped by a further motion of Council that was brought forward separately with direction to focus this service plan on where there are gaps in service and include additional information such as costs. So as a result, we're bringing forward a microtransit service plan. It's attached to the staff report and describes the service model, how it works, some possible approaches to implementation, and we'll share some of those key points with you today.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much, Patricia. Everybody can hear me all right? Excellent. All right, so the Halifax Transit Microtransit Service Plan identifies opportunities and options for implementing on-demand transit service. We know that providing equitable, efficient, and sustainable public transportation across a municipality is geographically diverse, as Halifax is a significant challenge. Communities outside the transit service area have a blend of open and natural spaces and scattered development patterns, which creates challenges to providing conventional transit service. Greater distances between destinations leads to longer travel times and higher operating costs, while lower ridership levels result in higher costs per passenger trip. Nonprofit, community-based transportation providers currently provide door-to-door transit service in 4 transit areas within the municipality. However, many communities still lack access to any form of transit. I'll have a little bit more detail on that in a moment. When it comes to our mission statement, microtransit is a solution to extend microtransit access to underserved communities and is in alignment with the strategic roadmap, the mission statement, the regional mobility goals stated here. All that information should be fresh for all of you folks, having just come off the core service plan. Inclusive and improved mobility options are included as part of the microtransit service plan. It also provides safe and reliable transit due to its on-demand nature and helps to reduce emissions on the sustainability front. I will also add that roadmap engagement speaks to a desire for transit in more communities, which I think we've heard throughout this discussion, and microtransit plan is a part of that. So defining microtransit. Microtransit increases the viability of providing transit to communities without adequate demand for conventional transit services. Compared to conventional transit, microtransit offers greater responsiveness and flexibility. Microtransit uses technology solutions to dynamically adjust routes based on real-time ridership needs, and typically microtransit uses smaller, more nimble vehicles such as vans or cutaway buses. Microtransit may be a viable option in places with low density or long distances between destinations, places with operational or road network constraints that are difficult for full-size buses to navigate, places with low ridership demand overall or during specific time periods, and places with disconnected pedestrian networks with unsafe or excessive walking distances to the nearest stop. So these key features which define microtransit: technology-enabled trips. Trips are requested, scheduled, and dispatched using a technology-enabled booking system, accessed through web portal, mobile app, or booking hotline. Trip information and updates are provided via a mobile app and text alerts before pickup. Dynamic routing and scheduling. The vehicle's path and schedule are optimized in real time based on road network conditions and passenger ride requests. Vehicle size. Vehicles of all sizes, including full transit buses, can be utilized. However, smaller vehicles such as vans or minibuses are better suited for lower population densities and unpredictable demand that typically comes with microtransit. Stops are typically flexible, so vehicles can stop at fixed route stops, curbside stops, or door-to-door service when picking up or dropping off passengers, depending on the service model. Microtransit also typically features service zones, so it typically operates within a defined service area and provides a connection to the wider transit network. Passengers traveling within the service area can do so on a single ride, whereas travel outside the service area typically requires transferring to a different service. So there are several different options for service models. First up is origin to hub, sometimes known as first mile, last mile, where microtransit provides mobility for customers in low demand areas to or from their nearest transit hub. This is first mile or last mile connectivity to the rest of the transit network, with all trips moving through the hub. We also have origin to destination service models, where microtransit vehicles provide a one-seat ride to connect any origin with any destination in the service areas. Transfers to a fixed route service are not necessarily required. We also see other service models, such as hybrids, where you have some trips which can be served through a hub and others which are served on a more door-to-door or curb-to-curb basis. To meet the needs of different communities and to learn and trial different service types, a combination of those two models, so a hybrid approach, is currently proposed in the microtransit service plan. We have several stop options, including door-to-door service, where a vehicle picks up and drops off the passengers directly at the building entrance of their specified origin and destination. There's also curb-to-curb service, where a vehicle picks up and drops off the passenger alongside a curb or at the base of a driveway outside the specified origin or destination. There's corner-to-corner service, where software directs the passenger to a short walk or roll, a predefined distance, usually to the nearest intersection for pickup and drop-off. We can also see microtransit service at transit hubs, which are safe, accessible locations where multiple transit routes intersect, with space for microtransit vehicles to lay over and passenger amenities. We can also have designated microtransit stops, so virtual or marked stops at strategic locations where they may be frequent trip requests. So multi-unit apartment complexes, university, hospital campuses, shopping malls, large parks, those sorts of places. Several options exist for bookings, but it is proposed that real-time bookings be the approach taken in Halifax. This is due to relatively small, compact zones, which we are looking at for the initial rollout, and our desire to confirm that we can reliably deliver this service to people on the fly. Options for microtransit fares could include creating a new fare category or creating zone-based or distance-based fares. For simplicity, it is currently proposed that one of the existing price tiers be adopted for microtransit. The plan assumes that the higher regional express fare will be charged to reflect longer travel distances and the convenience of curb-to-curb service. All fare programs offering discounted or free fares to students, seniors, low-income residents, and other groups would continue to be available for microtransit service. Many transit agencies do provide accessible transit and microtransit service with the same fleet. That is called commingling. Commingling can lower cost and improve its service. Halifax Transit's paratransit system, Accessibus, has established policy and operating procedures which will be evaluated as part of the strategic roadmap. So commingling with Accessibus is not planned for the initial rollout of microtransit services. However, it would be beneficial in the medium to long term to provide both services internally under one umbrella as a commingled service. I should highlight as well, microtransit services are planned to be universally accessible with or without commingling. So expanding service coverage here, we can see on our map the different zones where rural transit service providers are currently operating, along with the urban transit service boundary for Halifax Transit. Public transit services are available in large parts of the HRM provided by these different organizations, but there remain gaps where destinations are inaccessible by transit, and over 1,000 square kilometers, of the municipality is outside both the urban transit service boundary, where conventional transit service can be expanded, and outside any of the service areas of the rural transit service providers. Communities in this area typically have no public transit options and can be both too dispersed for conventional transit to be cost effective and too dense to qualify for the provincial subsidies that support rural transit services. Our primary direction coming out of the Rural Transit Report last year was to look at that gray area in these places where there were the largest gaps between rural transit service providers and Halifax Transit, where we currently did not have a transit option in place. So that moves us into phase 1 of what we are proposing in the microtransit service plan with our priority areas, I should say, where the plan proposes starting microtransit to provide service, but also to learn and grow as we move along. These communities were chosen based on lack of current available transit services, but also local transit propensity, how likely people are there to take transit, and operational feasibility. Each region has its own unique challenges, allowing opportunities to learn from different microtransit strategies to optimize the effectiveness of the service when planning future expansion. So we have a more in-depth look on this slide at what selection criteria we used. So obviously there's multiple overlapping pieces here that we were considering when looking across that gray zone at communities that fell into that gap. We recognize that there is merit in providing service across that whole gray area where there currently is no transit service. However, we started with these areas with the hopes of moving forward and expanding. We'll have a bit more about that later. So first up on that list is Lucasville. Lucasville has a high transit propensity. Resident demographics such as age and income levels suggest that residents would likely use transit. Growing suburbanization in and around the area, with many housing units being built or proposed for future development, also makes it a promising candidate. And another key piece is proximity to Sackville Terminal, providing the opportunity for connections to Halifax Transit and conventional bus routes. I should highlight here, as it's currently proposed, there would be a microtransit zone sort of in the core of the Lucasville area with stops outside of that area at Downsview and Sackville Terminal, so people would not be able to ride on demand in the areas immediately surrounding Downsview Park and Ride and Sackville Terminal, but would be able to take a shuttle directly there from anywhere inside of the Lucasville zone. We feel it's the most promising place to start and scale up due to the demographics and geography. However, we do have several other priority sites that I'll highlight as well. Next on the list is Fall River. It has a dispersed settlement pattern and street networks that make this community very difficult to serve with conventional transit. It's near an existing transit facility, Fall River Park and Ride, but not within a safe walking distance. It also has a commercial center that may generate microtransit trips. We feel it could demonstrate microtransit learnings over a larger area in population than Lucasville, as well as with different travel patterns, where Lucasville we expect to be more trips to a hub. We expect travel patterns in Fall River to be more origin to destination inside the community. Moving forward, we also have Cow Bay and Eastern Passage. This zone supports strong connections to 6B and C bus routes. It's the most populous of the proposed zones, with an estimated population of over 9,000. This service area would allow Cow Bay and Eastern Passage residents to travel within the community, as well as provide a connection to Portland Hills Terminal. Again, this would be a designated stop, so there would not necessarily be on-demand service the entire way to Portland Hills Terminal. It would be more of a shuttle service for people inside that zone or moving to that zone. This microtransit zone would test the potential of providing microtransit in a suburban community as an alternative to fixed route service. However, Cow Bay residents moving around their community and transferring to Portland Hills Terminal is expected to be a key part of this travel pattern as well. And then we have the Samborough Loop, which we have divided up into two zones. So Samborough Loop was previously served by Halifax Transit Route 402, which was discontinued back in 2017 due to low ridership. The largest and most challenging to serve zone. It has no major transit facility nearby. Both zones are proposed to, two zones are proposed due to the sprawling nature of the Samborough Loop and limited east-west connections. Both zones would connect with a stop at the South Centre Mall where Halifax Transit routes meet. In Sambro East, it's worth noting that the microtransit zone overlaps with Route 415. We expect that microtransit could address gaps when Route 415 is not running. Currently, it has fairly curtailed service. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Patricia.
Right. Thank you, Nick. So Nick just described the 5 priority areas. This slide shows a bit more about how we envision the phase in relationship to future phases. So phase 1 is shown there in purple, and essentially the 5 communities could all happen at once or in any order, but we are suggesting if only one were to proceed, the one we would do first would be Lucasville. It was a stronger candidate in all of our different categories. But phase 1 does include all 5 and some flexibility on how those roll out. Phase 2 is off to the side. It is a bit of a standalone. There may be some dependencies and efficiencies related to phase 1, but it doesn't need to tie in timeline-wise, so it's really shown in a separate box to operate independently. A bit about phase 2. It includes testing microtransit to address unmet transportation needs inside urban and suburban areas. This wasn't the primary focus of the plan, but we do see the potential for the model to work in some areas or during certain times of day. Some examples are there. The top image is pointing at Africville National Historic Site. Really, not just that location, but cultural and historic sites sometimes have seasonal or fluctuating demand. Africville Museum in particular, it's a far distance from existing bus routes. There's a few challenges to serving it with conventional service, which I won't elaborate on today, but it does mean there's a potential opportunity there that maybe microtransit would be better suited. The second image is Burnside Industrial Park, where because of the nature of the land uses there, the bulk of trips take place during weekdays. So transit only runs on weekdays and ends at 8 p.m. and doesn't operate on weekends, which is quite unique. Most of our service is 7 days a week now. Burnside does have those late night and weekend gaps though, and there are certainly still employers that have shifts that end in those times. But at this time, there's no evidence to suggest that it could support a fixed route service. But if microtransit were there in the late nights or weekends, then it could bring people to the nearest transit terminal to connect. The other opportunity within the urban and suburban areas that many people in North America is pursuing is replacing lower performing bus routes with microtransit. There's some benefit to passengers with this, reduces walking distance, especially if the road network means it's a long walk to a bus stop. And in areas where your bus is hourly, it may give you a better level of service. Also some flexibility to the transit agency because the smaller vehicles are often less expensive and shorter timelines to procure. So those are some opportunities in phase 2, but phase 2 really is separate and not related. The plan just acknowledges these types of potential applications, but suggests that if we were going to pursue them, they would probably come in the next core service plan or as a standalone report to council separately, because the focus at this time is really rural. And phase 3 there, regional expansion. I'll go into more detail on the next slide. Really meant to describe what would be expected in rural areas once those 5 initial priority areas have service. One of the benefits of microtransit is it is flexible, and so I'll use Fall River as an example. We've shown a zone in Fall River, and I'm sure there's people who live immediately in the zone and outside of the zone. What we've learned from our colleagues across the country is one of the benefits of microtransit is you can draw that zone, and if you still have a little bit of capacity with your vehicles, you can make it a little bit bigger on this side and a little bit bigger on that side and make it grow to gather more people in a more flexible and nimble way. The thought was that these zones would grow and continue to grow until that entire on-serviced area is covered. That's shown in green on this map. So that's called expanding initial priority areas. It is the intent of this plan that entire green area, essentially the 5 zones would grow until they're all touching and fill in that entire green area. How that happens will probably be unique and based on the travel patterns and the trip demand we're seeing, and also on resources. And then finally, the plan does touch on expanding to all rural areas. It does note, however, though, this would require significant resources due to the large geographic area and it would require some careful consideration because there are rural transit service providers there now. I think the services are different and in some ways complementary, but it would be a larger discussion on how to navigate that. And a significant cost. So the plan really does speak to filling out that entire green area primarily, and then beyond that is a little bit less concrete. A bit about the approach for implementation. What we're proposing is a proof of concept where a limited amount of services launched to really test the model, get feedback, and create an understanding of what that service is, what the expectations are, how it works. This is a new model our residents haven't seen before. That proof of concept could be in between could be for one or all 5 of the priority areas or any number in between. That would be the phase 1. Following proof of concept, we'd come back to go to regional council and look for direction on whether or not to continue to grow the service. So there would be a bit of a hard line there after proof of concept to say this is how it's working, this is what it looks like, and look for further direction. The second stage, if we were to proceed there, would be, we're calling it the building stage, where the major scaling and expansion would take place. And once we are at that stage and have confirmation that the intent is to scale up, that's when we'd be looking to integrate with Accessibus and establish any other organizational policy changes that may be required, such as, conversations about taxation. And during this building stage, that's when we would be expecting to build out to that entire unserviced area. And finally, the last stage would be operational, where it would be less about growth and more about maintaining operation and continuing to report back on performance metrics and feedback for improvements on the service. The plan does talk about operating models as well. There's many vendors in the market that offer technology that's needed for microtransit to work, but they go beyond tech into a whole suite of delivery options, including helping to plan or market or even run the service. There's a variety of level of vendor support across the country and pros and cons to the different models. For Halifax, the plan envisions commingling with Accessibus in the medium term, which does mean our vision is that this would be operated in-house by Halifax Transit. So the turnkey model has limited application for us, but it does have some potential benefit with initial startup and implementation. So this slide highlights kind of at a glance the 2 options, one of which is totally vendor provided or turnkey, and the other is in-house implementation. You can also really have a wide spectrum between those 2 options. Turnkey, again, really just for the short term, is more flexible, nimble, and could launch significantly faster. We call that accelerated implementation in the plan. Also, where the vendor would run the service and can potentially supply their own vehicles, then we would the turnkey could avoid the capital expense at the startup. So if we're doing a proof of concept and aren't really sure about the long-term future of the program, there would be merit in exploring that model to save some of those upfront costs and have some flexibility. However, once we move beyond proof of concept and transition to in-house, we would really just be pushing those capital costs down the road. So just wanted to share that as a bit of a background on some of the ways it's working across the country. In terms of funding the service, regardless of whether it's turnkey or in-house, looking at all the operating costs, it does average out, we think, to a little bit of over $100 per hour of service and is essentially scalable with the level of service. So we're assuming the same operating costs regardless of the model. The big difference here is the capital costs. So if we are purchasing those vehicles and running it ourselves, we're into capital costs. And if we are going with turnkey at the first stage, we could potentially avoid those costs as direct capital, I guess. So the costing for the first 5 priority areas is shown in the chart on the slide and also in more detail in the staff report. So these costs are for running 7 days a week, including weekend service. So as you can see, for all 5 areas, it's $5.74 million for a year in operating costs and $2.4 million in capital. And for just Lucasville, it would be $1.675 million in operating and $650,000 in capital. Phase 2 operating costs and would be similar. It would be by the hour. The difference is, and one of the opportunities, and really the only reason we have phase 2 in here, because our focus is rural, is there's potentially some efficiencies if there's service running in a community all day, but Burnside maybe needs service from 10 p.m. till midnight. You could potentially use the same vehicle in the lower times, or if there were seasonal uses in the summer when there's less demand from commuters, there may be some efficiencies there. There's likely we would have less capital costs with that and potentially higher cost recovery. So for phase 3, we did cost out expansion to the entire area that's on service by either Halifax Transit or a rural transit provider, which is an additional $6.7 million a year. So if we were looking at doing that whole on-service area, our estimates are about $12.5 million a year in operating costs. Expansion to cover all rural areas not serviced by Halifax Transit currently is higher. So if we look at everything not covered by Halifax Transit today, our estimates are about $55 million per year in operating. So we put that in there because I feel like we were asked or would be asked, what's the long term, where is this going? But at the same time, I would caution that we're much less certain on that number. We really need experience with the model to see what kind of efficiencies we have and what it looks like and what the service level expectations are. But perhaps it can be used as a bit of an order of magnitude cost. So to wrap up, we're here today with the recommendation to approve the service plan as an approved approach. Our recommendation also hopes to get direction on the scale and the implementation in terms of where to start. So we're recommending proceeding with Lucasville, largely because it is a resource draw, including budget and also staff capacity. So we've just recommended the one as a start, and that we would come back with the detailed budget requests as part of the 27-28 budget process next year. So that's the recommendation in the report. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Patricia and Nick. Could someone put the motion on the floor, please?
Thank you. I move that the Transportation Standing Committee recommend that Regional Council 1 approve the microtransit service plan as attached to the staff report dated February 3rd, 2026 as a planning framework to guide the growth and development of public transit services in the short term, and 2, direct the Chief Administrative Officer to prepare for the implementation of microtransit in Lucasville as a proof of concept and bring forward detailed costs and resource requirements associated with this implementation for Regional Council's consideration as part of the 27-28 budget process. All right, thank you.
No, sorry. We need no. Someone on the committee, please. Councillor Young. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. So, yeah, we can tell by the enthusiasm around the council table here that this has been a long time coming. And thank you for kind of recapping the history of where we started with this and how we've ended up where we are today. Because, there has been a lot of work that's gone into this. It has been a journey. And, and so I'm so excited to see this in front of us today. I think part of the enthusiasm around here is that we all have a desperate need for expanded transit in many of our districts, whether it be, Fall River, Cow Bay, Lucasville, and of course Sambro, which is where I started with this back in 2023. And, I think, if we could do it all, I would love to do it. But we're in a situation where we kind of have to balance some priorities here with budget as well in how we proceed. And I'm also, curious about the scaling up. Like if we go with the turnkey solution, are they even able to scale up to do pilots in all the areas? So I have questions about budget implications, what that would mean if we did all 5 pilots, what that would mean to the budget. Is it even possible to scale it up that much? What are the risks associated with that? I kind of like the idea of starting with 1 pilot and doing a proof of concept. Learning from that, it would only be halfway through this fiscal year that would get initiated. then we would, be able to take some quick wins from that and move into phase two, which I assume we would be looking at this time next year to put in a budget request in for all 5 areas. So it's really just kind of like a 6-month learning window there. I mean, from a budgetary perspective, that's what I would like to see. From an equity and a pent up need perspective, getting transit back around the Sambro Loop is obviously, a priority for District 11. And, it becomes then a question of like, how do we prioritize? And you did such a great job kind of laying out the unique circumstances of each area and what could be learned from providing transit. And I love this concept because it is so nimble and so adaptable, and it's kind of the solution that we've been looking for. So I'm gonna let others speak, and I'm sure everyone's gonna speak to the need in their own particular district. But Sambro Loop, we heard from a lot of residents in terms of interest, community interest. I know that there is a lot around the loop, a lot of interest. We did have a bus. It failed with low ridership after a scheduling change was made, and it stopped working for people. Because from what I've been told and what I've learned is that there was a route that was only, as you propose, only down one side a long time ago. That was very popular, was very successful. People who took that, I had a lot of healthcare workers who used that to get to work, and they said it worked until the route changed to go all the way around the loop, and then the schedule just didn't work anymore for commuters. So I kind of like the focus. I like the phase 1 and the phase 2. I am got a lot of questions about expanding this throughout HRM, because I think there's a real difference between the rural commuter shed, where you have people commuting daily into employment centers, versus a truly rural service, which is kind of has a different rhythm to life and how that would work. But in terms of just focusing on getting this kicked off, I'm thrilled that it's here. I'm going to support Lucasville being the pilot. I'll see where the discussion goes, around alternatives. But thank you very much for bringing this forward.
Councillor Kent.
Very much, Madam Chair. So I haven't stopped smiling since I saw this report. I'm just so happy to see Eastern Passage and Cow Bay, well, Cow Bay in particular, recognized as what we could possibly do out there. I've been in and out of this work, and you have heard me before for 20 years, but when I left council the first time between 2004 and 2007, Eddie Robar was, I think, the transit director, and we had organized a wave to do a pilot at that time. And then I moved to legislature, and it kind of fell off the rails, and priorities changed and all those things. So the first thing I did when I got back, of course, is put that back on the table. Robin, I'm going to just suggest to you that, and your staff, that I'm one of the first things I mentioned to you was this particular area, in particular Cow Bay. I'm so excited to see it there. And all of these, I'm excited for all of our rural areas. Kathy, I know that you have, or Councillor Dagogam, I know you have concerns around yours. But I hope that you can just be happy for me for just a few minutes. When I saw the pilot's priority being Lucasville, for just a second, I was wishing that it was Cow Bay, but when you lay out the rationale the way you did, I really can support that. I'm happy to support that. I do have a question on if this goes well and it goes forward, is the list that you have a bit of a priority in order, or is that still up? That would still be up for debate. Population. I'm curious where the population for the Eastern Passage Cow Bay area came from. 9,000 is low. About 10 years ago, we were at 13,000. So I'm just wondering if you can comment on that. Maybe it's a smaller catchment than the entirety. I don't know. And of course, we're and I know we've talked about this before, that we're, destined for major growth in the Morse Lake extension. So I do like the idea of the first mile, last mile, in particular for Eastern Passage. I would like a little clarity on when it notes that there's an option to go to the Portland Hills terminal. That just about sent me over the top. It's like the icing on the cake, because that connector has been on the table for the residents of this area forever, the connection between Cole Harbour and Eastern Passage. They are sister communities, and that this would be the beginning of something. That's the other part of this that I want to recognize, that this is a beginning stage to measure the impact of transit in areas that don't have it, and those areas are going to grow. So it can give us some data along the way. It can satisfy residents who have been underserved, certainly by transit, not in the transit catchment. So I get that, and I think people will be very happy to pay more to get. I mean, it's hard now. We always thinking about people who would have to pay more for something. It's a tough time to be saying that, but by the time we get to some of these areas, it could be 3-4 years out. So lastly, before I run out of time, I want to acknowledge all the work that's been done to go into this. It's not an easy job. Patricia, you've been around a long time, and we've been talking to you about transit. I certainly have. And the team that you have in place now, I just want you to know how much I value all of you for the work that you do. My last question is, what's a cutaway bus? So let's leave it there.
Cheaper bus is only half a bus.
It's a short bus.
So I think Councillor Mancini may have preempted me on that last question. A cutaway bus is, the sort of vehicle you might see for excessive bus. It's a smaller bus than a conventional 40-foot bus, which makes it potentially better aligned for microtransit service, just due to the loads that we expect for that. Moving backwards, I suppose, talking about the catchment area, I believe that is a smaller catchment area. I can go back if you'd like and try to find the details on how we calculate a population there.
I would, because I'd like make sure that it's represented well, if you do.
Even at 9,000, we do recognize it as the most populous of the areas we're looking at, and so that definitely plays a role in how we're allocating things. But we can take that back and get back to you about that.
Okay, thank you.
And then I think the first question you asked was about whether the list was necessarily a list in order. Ultimately, it is a council decision which order to move forward with. We have recommended Lucasville as, if we're going to do proof of concept, to include Lucasville in that. Potentially other communities could be included in that if that's the will of council. We may learn lessons as we move along, and we can come back with recommendations as this evolves. At present, I would not say that there is a firm ordered list that is attached to this in that particular way. We've identified the priority areas, but they don't need to be arranged particularly in the way that we lay them out in the presentation here.
Okay, thank you. I'll keep smiling.
Thank you, Councillor Mancini.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nick and Patricia, thank you very much for the presentation. Since I've been elected in 2016, we've talked about bold moves that comes to transit. And it took a long time before we saw our first bold move, in my opinion, and that was, electric buses. And then we talked about Mill Cove project and e-ferries. That's another bold move, which we had to fight for in case and stop it from being paused. Microtransit is another bold move. That's what we're looking for, right? The mayor mentioned earlier in the previous presentation about the discussions we're having and the challenges of moving people around. Microtransit does that. Now, in the previous presentation, when we talked about core service plan, I didn't bring up my particular district. I do have questions, and I'll take that offline with you guys. In this one, Deputy Mayor is right. Everyone has they want to come up here and say, what about this area and this area? But I do have an area, but it's Burnside, and Patricia, you alluded to Burnside. It's obvious you've paid attention. You gave examples of Burnside, but just to pause for a moment. So Burnside has over 30,000 people working in there, over 2,000 businesses. It's the largest industrial park east of Montreal. And when the Halifax Partnership is out there selling Halifax, it's one of the elements, one of the features of Halifax is selling. And, you know, the challenge we've had, and in your core service plan, you mentioned about improvements, which is fantastic. The biggest challenge is, and you know, I'm looking at Councillor Dale Gammon, who ran an operation there for a long time, understands this very well, is getting people across Burnside. So obviously micro transit, I think, fits very well in that. So I guess my question, what prevents Burnside to being part of the phase one, where it's such an importance to the overall municipality, and it's growing, and we're into phase 13 now, that's almost full, and we're almost at capacity. So if you could speak to that. And then my next question, you know, the decision about turnkey versus in-house. And turnkey, if I understood that, that's much quicker, 1 year, versus in-house 2 to 4 years. Already, I've heard in the media today a couple of times the ATU having concerns about it, and I understand, right, why that concern is. But myself personally is we need to move people around more efficiently, quicker and sooner, and that 2 to 4 year is a concern. But if we were to go in-house, the mayor asked about cost sharing with electric vehicles. Are we able also to tap in possibly that Canadian Federal Transit Fund for if we were to do in-house? So those are my two questions: is the about Burnside, and if we were to do in-house at some point in time, is there funding out there for us to make it happen, maybe even faster? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Or through the chair to the councillor, I think that what prevented us from recommending Burnside for phase one was really that the motions we were working with directed a focus on rural areas, and really that was our emphasis and our focus. And the thought was that once we have experience with the model, then, and everyone is aware of what it is and how it works, it would be easier to translate that and talk to our urban and suburban residents about it. I feel like often when we have talked about it in the past, there's the fixed route service is a known, and so it's been a bit more of, well, but why isn't it a bus route? I don't understand. So if we did a proof of concept in one community, then maybe it's easier for people to understand kind of what the idea and the concept is. But ultimately, the only thing that prevents it from happening, you know, alongside Lucasville as a proof of concept would be funding and resourcing, honestly. Okay. Related to being turnkey versus in-house, and maybe I'll expand on that because I think Councillor Cuddle touched on it as well, and we didn't really respond at that time. My understanding is that there are vendors that, for example, have, you know, call centers that can take incoming calls, right. And these things are set up across the country, and that vendors that so as part of very early work in this, we met with I think 7 or 8 different vendors in Canada, and some of them have told us that they've worked with other municipalities, and we've talked to other municipalities as well. We're maybe launching one community, and then the next one 3 or 6 months later, and the next one 3 or 6 months later, and some of them do have that, or have, you know, seem to have that capacity. The in-house, though, of course, it would require capital funding, purchase of vehicles, and even depending on how large of a proof of concept stage, you know, even recruitment becomes the existing staff capacity to do all of that becomes a challenge. Right. So in terms of funding in the future, you know, the Canadian Public Transit Fund is still relatively new. I think it's a potential opportunity for some of the capital costs, probably. We see less opportunities for operating costs, but I would think, you know, looking a few years down the road, year 3, 4, 5, we have seen dedicated funding for rural transit solutions come out from time to time. So in preparing this report, we didn't see anything obvious right now that would make sense, but that doesn't mean that there won't be dedicated either zero emission or rural transit funds to draw in the future.
Thank you both. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hartling.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for this report. Obviously, it's a very mixed blessing, I think, for somebody like me, or if you're a resident of District 13. I am just trying to understand the math correctly. So given that Prospect was not one of the prioritized communities, and I can talk about that, but I think that everybody, you know, we've all gone, you know, I don't think that it's valuable in this moment to talk about why you know, why that is and how I feel about it. What I wonder is that when in the future could it help, or could we think about it across the municipality, because that's what it would mean for me, and for District 13. And if I'm understanding correctly, we'll be at a $55 million investment for microtransit across the municipality. Am I understanding that correctly? I'm looking at the regional expansion. So in order for you to get into your priority zones is approximately 6.7 million. Once you're in the expansion phase, it would be an additional 42.5 million. So am I understanding that really to put microtransit in all rural areas of the municipality, we'd be looking at a $55 million investment? Have I just described that correctly?
Through the chair to the councillor, I think you may have described it correctly and I may have misunderstood, but the 55 million is for the entire area outside of the current Halifax Transit Service area. For the 5 priority zones, it would be 5.75 million in operating, but for the entire, I guess on one slide it's green, for the entire unserviced area, it's about 12.5 million. And that's really what the plan recommends, is that area that is the gap between what Halifax Transit provides and what Bay Rides, Musco, and East Hants Rider provides. So to fill that entire gap area would be about 12.5 million. So that's kind of how it scales. So 5.75, 12.5, and then the 55 million is all of the rural areas, if we were to ever go that big. The 12.5 for the area that is a gap is the plan really recommends filling that gap. Beyond that, I think there's bigger conversations about the dependencies there and what that looks like.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just a question about the 26-27 budget. So there's no financial implication for this year. So when the report, first of all, great report. I'd say that publicly. Great report. It was so fulsome. There was so much information in there. Very, very well done. But just on the implications for budget. So this phase 1 proof of concept is planned for 27-28, so not this year. Okay. So whatever we approve today, we will see a report come back for the following year, not this year. It won't touch this year's budget for whatever that initial pilot proof of concept. Okay, so that's good to know. I was wondering about the in-camera information report and how we could possibly bring that into the conversation as well, which I don't think we have time today, but wondering if it was appropriate for budget committee if we talk about this during the budget, if there's an opportunity to ask for it to be part of the conversation during our budget deliberations this week. And also, I have time. Yeah, Dave, so Councillor Hensby, I just want to share comments from him because he's watching online. So back in 2005, Transit was going to do a service survey for the Lawrencetown, but the following year in 2006, the regional plan came into effect and it froze the current service boundaries for transit. Microtransit will finally break the service boundary barrier. But prior to the pandemic, Musco Rider, which is a great service, made a presentation to TSC about a 45-kilometer fixed loop service between the terminals at Porters Lake and Portland Hills along Highway 207. Apparently, Musco Rider wishes to update its business plan and offer this service once for all. Besides this, it will provide access to Lawrencetown Beach, Hope for Wildlife, Souls Harbor Rescue Mission, and Chesapeake Acadian Cultural Center. The 2007 fixed loop can be a proof of concept model. So I guess we'll wait for Musco Rider to update its business plan, and then they might pursue conversations about offering that service. That would be amazing, and that would be much more economical for HRM if they are able to offer that service for the 207. That would be amazing. So I just wanted to share that from Councillor Hensby.
Okay. Next is
Are we able to bring it forward for the budget?
Maybe I can try to help a bit on that as well.
Thank you.
The other thing beyond budget I would mention is that the recommendation here is for this to go to council. So this will be at council as well as here. So there is opportunity there to go in camera if so desired then.
There is. We have a lot of people on the board, and we could defer the rest of the discussion, or we could keep going, depending on how committee members feel. We may be able to wrap this up in the next 20 minutes or so. We do have one in-camera item that we have to deal with today. So would you like to continue on? And yes? Okay. All right. Very good. Next up then, Councillor Dago-Gammon.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So yeah, I'll do the wild thing. Please add Fall River to your pilot. So I can't make that ask because I'm not a member of the committee, but I would ask a member of the committee if they might consider asking to add Fall River for a pilot. I think the choice of Lucasville was the proper one and support it absolutely. But I would like to see us amend. I would like to ask a member of the committee to amend the motion to add Fall River, and then we can have a good comparison. Fall River has the commercial core, which is different than Lucasville, so I do think that it would be very interesting to be able to see the comparison, and so that's what I would ask. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up then is Councillor Gillis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to add my support for this. I think it's great. We're expanding transit. Lucasville, long time coming for transit. Very close to my community. Makes no sense how it was never connected to my community in the first place. And I just want to add my support to all these. And thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Ms. Chair. And if I can ask, maybe this is a dumb question, but we'll see. Nothing like finding out. When I kind of like think about this, is this just more expensive Uber? Like where it's your make your request and it's door to door, and like what's the difference between this and like a rideshare? Other than price?
Through the chair to the councillor, I think one of the main differences would be the intent to have multiple people on the trip together. So it would be dynamically picking up other people along the way. And I don't know if Uber or rideshares do that.
They used to before they became more taxi-like. That was the original idea of rideshare, hence the name.
Right. Yeah. So the idea would be to have potentially multiple passengers along the trip and stopping and picking up multiple times, not just a direct door-to-door for a single person.
Yeah. Okay. Dumb question out of the way. The other piece that I wanted to ask about, I mean, so a lot of the details of this come back with the report, the kind of part 2 of this recommendation. It doesn't sound like in the pilot kind of phase, whether that's just Lucasville or whether it includes Fall River, that there's an intention to adjust taxation at this time as part of the pilot, is there?
So that would entirely be up to council. The report recommends not doing that at this point for a few reasons, because it would be a fairly large endeavor, and if there's a proof of concept that ends up being one community and is limited and maybe gets scaled back over time, to change the tax policy in advance of that. And also I guess to be a bit blunt about it, to let people know what they're buying first, right? So to see this in operation and what it looks like. I mean, but obviously we would take.
I actually
council's
think it's the
direction.
reverse. I think we should tax when the service arrives, because otherwise it's going to be, I've had this service for the last 2 years and now you're coming to me, what have my taxes been paying for the whole time? I think as we expand service, the taxation should go with it. Hand in glove. So Lucasville, if that's the first, it should open with the area rate expanding into Lucasville. If Fall River is alongside, it should come to Fall River, but we should absolutely not be setting up a situation where 3 years later, we're then telling people, oh, by the way, now you're going to start paying an area rate for this, because that I don't see that as, as politically wise or viable for managing this, let alone for the fact that we are going to struggle just to pay for them to begin with. That discussion, you don't need that now, do you? That would be when the number 2 comes back as part of the report?
Councillor would be correct. We don't need any kind of decision on that right now.
Okay, well, I will signal that for me, if the service is being expanded, the taxes need to go with it at the same time. And if it doesn't work, well, then you get to go back to tell people, say, well, the service doesn't work, but now your taxes are going down. And so I wanted to also ask about Councillor Daigle-Gammon's request. You know, I get where she's coming from, right? Like where she had, like her community was fixated on one particular solution. If we can just get that express bus to come into the community, then we can solve this. And we've got that negative recommendation on that one, and I understand why, and the additional 10 minutes and all that. So I can see why it's a bitter pill to then be like, oh, and we're not even on the pilot for this. What would be the implications if we were to direct that Fall River be included? Is it just a cost thing, or are there other kind of things for us to consider in terms of if we added communities to this?
Through the chair to the councillor, it is largely a cost thing. It is also a bit about runway and staff capacity. So if, because there's nothing in the 26-27 budget for this, so we'd be looking at 27-28 anyway. If where Lucasville would keep it very small and manageable in terms of staff capacity, and if we were to add all 5, that's a significantly different undertaking to try to ramp up and get ready for that. But I think it depends on when they'll be funding for it anyway. If there were no funding in 27-28 and we weren't starting till 28-29, then we have lots of runway and it would be more achievable to start with a bigger amount. So it really does depend on the timing and when the budget will come and how much lead time we have in advance. But it's any of the options are not impossible, I would say.
If council wanted a variation of number 2, how much
Councillor
work?
Austin, I think you're almost out of time here.
Okay, I'll come back and ask that.
Okay, thank you. Next up is Councillor White.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for this. This is exciting. I really like to see these innovative things. This is great. I would add my voice in support of an area rate. I was wondering about a donated fleet, or is there some way to get the cost down by getting local businesses excited about this? I don't know if it's an advertising opportunity, or like cars are expensive, like minivans, like 80 grand. I'm just wondering if any other ways of funding this have been looked into. And with respect to the regional express fares, do you track how well those are collected now? In my experience, they're not so much collected in the buses I've been on that are supposed to pay it. And then lastly, I just wanted to add my excitement about Africville. I think that is something. I got a letter from a whole grade 3 class in the spring looking for a bus to Africville. I think that's a great idea. And when will you be looking at these phase 2 options? Because being in more dense area, I can see them, especially the Burnside. When would you look at phasing in phase 2? Because I saw the overlap there. That's a lot. There you go.
Sure. In terms of funding and donating fleet, I mean, we would be looking to put a lot of kilometers on them, so we would be looking obviously for brand new vehicles. And I think we mentioned we'd want them all to be accessible vehicles for mobility devices. So there wouldn't be any sitting around. But in terms of trying to find donations, I think our thought was that there are streams related to rural funding from time to time that might help with the capital. It's just if and when anything would line up with what we were looking to do. But certainly open to being more creative with that if council thinks there's value. In terms of tracking how well we collect the Regional Express top-up, we wouldn't have metrics on that. I think particularly when you're transferring or you have a pass for another system and you need to pay the extra, dollar and change, then no, we wouldn't have data on that, I don't believe, unless Phil corrects me. But phase 2, we really don't have a timeline associated with that. Our intent was that phase 1 would start first, and once we had a few of these vehicles out there, then we could start looking at that as part of the network. But again, open to take direction on any of that.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Councillor Young?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Patricia and team again. There's a lot of why just Lucasville as a pilot. Currently, Lucasville is without transit. There's no sidewalks, narrow road shoulders, 10K plus daily vehicles and traffic on the 7.2 kilometer Lucasville Road. It's a historical black community that's 199 years old and still without the service in the community. There's a future potential for a multi-use pathway in the community, and but when that goes through, there's plans for bus pads along the route itself. It's close proximity to the Sackville terminal. On the cost end, is there a partnership alternative to work with the province through Link Nova Scotia to try to save on some of the costs for this pilot too as well? And I don't know, I don't have the year, but is it in the past 250,000 of funding for Lucasville for transit was allocated, and then is it true that funding went to the Route 320 up to the airport? If you can get back to me on that. And what's the other thing? A pilot is the precursor to maybe best practices and doing things in a different way and a more cost-effective way in the beginning. If we go from each one of the ones on the list, it's not a pilot anymore. If it does come to the motion amendment, I'm not for it for Fall River. So I'll just leave it at that. Thanks, Patricia.
Just in response through the chair to the councillor, partnerships with Link Nova Scotia, we really haven't explored any external partnerships yet. I mean, this is a plan for the first time in front of council members for review, but certainly willing to explore any opportunities about implementation going forward. I'm not aware of any kind of financial partnership that would be possible there, but we can certainly look at it. I do know about the $250,000 at one time for Lucasville in 2011. It was the first question I ever answered at Northwest Community Council. It did not go to the Route 320. It would have went back into the budget to be reallocated otherwise. So I am familiar with that long-standing budget allocation that then also just went away. So yeah, it would have just went back to the broader capital budget balancing exercise at the time.
So the close proximity doesn't that play a part in your reasoning to have a pilot in that area? Close proximity to the current terminal there.
Yes. So if I can just confirm, it does play a role in our recommendation that Lucasville be included in the pilot proof of concept phase. We want to work first and foremost with a microtransit zone that we feel can work well as a feeder into the conventional transit system, and just where it is extremely close to Sackville Terminal and a large number of buses moving through the Downsview area, we feel that's a very strong potential connection, and that was something that really solidified Lucasville as a recommendation from us. Is there anything further on that you'd like?
No, that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Deputy Mayor Cuddle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councillor Austin, bitter pills. There are many bitter pills around this table. You know, you want to talk about disappointment in a community when, you know, the bus around Sambro Loop got canceled. There were a lot of people who were very upset and are also very excited about getting some kind of transit service back. You know, again, it comes to looking through, I think, lenses here and how we make these priorities. You know, if I go back to Sambro, we look at the Sambro West, it's the lowest cost addition to this budget. It also services one of the highest communities in terms of equality, income equality. You know, I just pulled off Stats Can that the median household income around Sambro Loop is $77,000. In Fall River, you're looking at $140,000, double. In terms of ability to pay, in terms of community need, you know, I could sit here and make a pitch for why Sambro West should be the addition. But what I think is important here is that we get this rolling with proof of concept without complicating this. That's really what I'm excited about. You know, again, I look at the staff back here who I know have worked on this file for many years. From a motion that I brought forward in 2023 about reviewing the gaps in rural service because my community was desperately asking for service back. We look at the number of letters we've received. You know, I don't want to pit one district against another in terms of who has the most need here, but I can't support a motion to bring Fall River forward without considering what is the criteria in which we approve additions to this budget. And we are again in a tight budget year where, you know, I think a 6-month lead to unroll a pilot in Lucasville and get our feet under ourselves and work out some of the kinks and bugs along the way, because I also know that the success of rolling this out is going to depend on the success of the program as a whole, and we've got some things to figure out. This is the first time that we are doing this, and though other places are doing it across the country, this is a first for us, and it is a bold move and it's a big step forward. So you know, this does have to go to regional council. Perhaps between now and that time, there'll be some additional information that comes forward that might change my mind. But for today, I'm going to very much support the motion that's on the floor. If there's additions to that, then I'll also be moving to add Sambro West to that list for all the reasons I've stated. You know, specifically thinking about the community of Harrietsfield, and in my mind, and trying to get some transit service to them. Thank you.
Thank you, and Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Ms. Chair. Just on Councillor Cuddle's comments, just to clarify, there's nothing happening this year. It's not 6 months and then there's transit happening in Lucasville. This is a plan in number 2 you return to us. This is next year at the earliest. And we don't have any budget plan right now for next year either.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, colleagues, like, I mean, you think this budget year is fun, you look at like, okay, so transit plan, we'll do the easy things that we don't have to pay for this year. I mean, that's the current plan that we just passed. Don't worry, we'll take a look at that next year. And now this year, this is on next year's. I mean, next year's budget's just going to be as horrendous as this year because our wish list is this long and our finances are this, right? So just wanted to make sure I understood that correctly. So I did want to ask with number 2, right? And I'm not going to move a Fall River motion here. I mean, I think the area councillor at regional council can do that, given feedback around the room here from the committee, and that would be the appropriate place for that discussion. I did want to ask though to kind of close that loop up with number 2. If council were interested in moving some other kind of combination of communities other than what's recommended, where you're going to come back with a plan, how much additional work is it to come back with a plan that has options to pick from? Like, you could do this one, just the Lucasville one. You could do this one, which is Lucasville plus some other community. You could do this one, right? Like, how much additional work is that? Or are you really looking for that decision now, and what you bring back in number 2 is going to be specifically just that decision?
Through the chair to the councillor, our intent was with number 2 was if we had the direction on which community or communities for proof of concept, we would bring that as part of budget next year. So it doesn't explicitly say in a staff report for a closer look, although we could do that. I mean, conceivably, we could have multiple options for the 27-28 BAL, like, choose what you're interested in. But I think that the approach and the approach for staff and the timeline does change depending on how big it is. So if we were thinking that we were going to do just Lucasville in 27-28, we may not be prepared to do 5 if we came to budget time next year and we're told to do 5. We probably need more runway. So that doesn't really answer your question.
No, it kind of does.
No.
What I'm hearing is you'd very much like a decision from us one way or the other at regional when this comes. So I that's what I read anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Austin. So there is no one else on the board, so I'll call for the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much to Patricia and to Nick. It's an innovative project, and it's very challenging to get something new off the ground. So we appreciate all the work that's gone into this. Thank you. So we're going to defer 13.1.3, the transit KPI report, for a future meeting because this meeting is a long one. Yes, we need a motion to defer. Thank you, Councillor Austin, seconded by Councillor Purdy. Thank you. And that takes us all in favor. Sorry. All in favor. Those opposed? Carries. So that takes us to our in-camera. Thank you, Councillor Purdy. No, we have to go in camera.
There is conversation.
So we're back out of camera. And Deputy Mayor Cuddle is going to ratify the motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that the Transportation Standing Committee this is the convening in camera to discuss. Where's the, okay, where's that one? Sorry. The Transportation Standing Committee ratify the in-camera decision.
Yeah, approve the direction given in camera and private.
Approve the direction given in camera and private. Thank you.
Very good. Motion passes. Any notices of motion? Seeing none. The date of our next meeting is February 26, 2026. And could I have someone motion to adjourn? Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We are through. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, everyone.